Chapter 2497. It was also because the Tianfeng Chu clan didn't tell them about the situation on the abandoned continent. One had to know that the environment on the abandoned continent was so harsh and the conditions were so harsh. Even the greediest people would think twice. After all, it would be a great loss if they died on the abandoned continent. For warriors, without strength, there was no guarantee. It was too dangerous on the abandoned continent. It was no wonder that the Tianfeng Chu clan had to summon the people of the Tianfeng mercenary city to act as guards for their juniors. Firstly, it was to prevent the two clans from tampering with the selection of guards. Secondly, it was to reduce the casualties of their own clans. Damn it, they really had a good idea. However, even if the people of the Tianfeng mercenary city knew about this, they could only accept it. After all, they were already here. How could they leave now? Even if they wanted to leave, the Tianfeng Chu clan guarding outside wouldn't allow them to do so. Besides, they had signed an employment agreement with the Tianfeng Chu clan. They could only accept it. But fortunately, they remembered that they had called Luo Xiaoqi over. With Luo Xiaoqi, they would have a guarantee on the abandoned continent. Luo Xiaoqi's observation ability was more useful than anything else on the abandoned continent. Everyone was very glad that they were thick-skinned and that Elder Fu was shameless. Otherwise, where were they going to find someone to guard the abandoned continent for them? They couldn't count on the Tianfeng Chu clan. Perhaps they couldn't see as clearly as Luo Xiaoqi. Everyone was looking forward to Luo Qingtong's appearance. Seeing that Luo Qingtong, Chu Xiaofeng, and the others didn't appear for a long time, they were about to die from anxiety. The others and the disciples of the Tianfeng Chu clan left first. They were left here to wait for Luo Qingtong. They would catch up later. Seeing Luo Qingtong appear, they were so excited that they almost cried. Quick, quick, quick. Little seventh young master, look around. Is there anything we need to pay attention to? Also, this is the secret signal that we have discussed. Young Master Xiaoqi, if you encounter something that requires special attention, you must mark it with the secret signal and tell us if we can touch it or not. The group had already come up with a set of danger level markers that were suitable for them. From no danger to absolute danger and untouchable, a total of 5 levels were waiting for Luo Qingtong to mark them. At that time, they would not listen to the Tianfeng Chu family. They would only listen to Luo Qingtong. She told them not to touch it, and they were determined not to touch it. They only touched what they were told to do. Otherwise, he would lose his life in this abandoned continent. Yes. Luo Qingtong looked at them and nodded with a smile. She had previously promised these mercenaries that she would keep an eye out for them on this abandoned continent. Luo Qingtong was very clear that in this abandoned continent, her strength was not strong. If he wanted to obtain the Sky Luo grass, he would have to resort to some extreme measures. These mercenaries would be her help at a critical moment. Most importantly, these people had always protected her before. Their nature was neither good nor bad, but they knew how to repay kindness. Luo Qingtong didn't mind helping them. Not to mention that they had stood up for her in front of Chu Ku before. Okay, take a paper and write it down yourselves. Luo Qingtong glanced at the set of danger levels they gave and memorized it in her heart. Chapter 2498. Her blood-red eyes opened silently. With just a glance, she was able to see through the camouflage of many spiritual flowers and spiritual herbs. There were also some demonic plants and geographical conveniences. Luo Qingtong's explanation explained everything. Soon, he told her about the dangers and the characteristics of the spiritual flowers and spiritual herbs that he could see in the periphery of the abandoned continent, as well as the other spiritual flowers and spiritual herbs that he could infer based on these characteristics and habits, as well as the geographical environment of the other spiritual flowers and spiritual herbs. Alright, that's about it. Luo Qingtong's expression was indifferent. She clapped her hands and collected a spiritual herb in her palm. A bloodthirsty demonic plant emerged from under the spiritual herb. In an instant, it was nailed to the ground by Gui Feng and the others who were following closely behind her. It turned out that this demonic plant was actually coiled around that spiritual herb. The two grew together and were almost intertwined into one. There was no difference between them. Only by choosing the right spiritual herb and grasping its heart meridian, when pulling it out, would the demonic plant not be brought out. At the same time, one would not be attacked by the demonic plant during the plucking process. Otherwise, if one was stung by the bloodthirsty demonic plant, the wound would continue to bleed. If they could not find a way to treat it, they would bleed to death. Not only that, the demonic plant could expand and contract freely. It was as thin as a strand of hair. Once it succeeded, it would immediately wrap around and turn into a cocoon-like thing, wrapping the human or beast. Its roots would penetrate deeply into the other party's body until the other party's blood was sucked dry. Only then would it fall off. It was simply an invisible killer. Everyone watched as Luo Qingtong pulled out the spiritual herb without any hesitation. Looking at the demonic plant that was nailed to the ground by Gui Feng and the others, it was still twisting and stretching out its hair-like roots, desperately trying to find flesh and blood. Suddenly, they couldn't help but shudder. Damn it, this was too scary. Damn it. If it weren't for Luo Qingtong's explanation, how would they know that there was such a danger hidden under these spiritual flowers and spiritual herbs? Didn't they still come to pluck the spiritual herbs after defeating the guardian beast? At that time, wouldn't they die without a burial place? Everyone's expression was horrified. Chu Xiaofeng was also astonished to the extreme. Previously, when the group of mercenaries appeared, he was especially vigilant. He was afraid that the other disciples of the Tianfeng Chu clan were plotting against him, so he deliberately sent people to wait here. However, it didn't seem like it. These people all came from different mercenary groups, and the badges they wore were all different. Under such circumstances, he finally relaxed his nerves a little. Otherwise, he would have made a move the moment these people appeared. Then he realized that these people were all here for Luo Qingtong. He was still puzzled. Although this young man was quick-witted, he didn't seem to be strong. Why were these people chasing after him so much? In fact, it wasn't just weak. Chu Xiaofeng had never seen a mercenary weaker than Luo Qingtong. He didn't know how someone who wasn't even in the exalted realm managed to get into the mission. When she found out that it was the mercenaries who had requested her to come, she was a little curious. But he still couldn't see what was so special about her. At this moment, Luo Qingtong made a move. Only then did he know how powerful the young man's ability was. He also had information about the spiritual herb in the other party's hand. However, he only knew that it was the thousand threads grass, which was very strange and rare. Although it was a top-grade spiritual herb, it was also very dangerous to pluck and couldn't be touched casually. Chapter 2499. Not only that, but Chu Xiaofeng was also stunned as he listened to Luo Qingtong and the mercenaries explain the general growing environment of the thousand threads grass and what kind of places it might be found. Based on the characteristics of the surrounding environment and the general scene, one could determine that the thousand threads grass was nearby. Damn. Even the top disciples of the Tianfeng Chu family didn't have such information. This Luo Xiaoqi was simply amazing. Only now did Chu Xiaofeng know what kind of treasure he had picked up. He had chosen the people of the Red Flame Mercenary Group because he had long understood the character and strength of the people of the Red Flame Mercenary Group. He also couldn't stand Chu Ku's arrogance, so he took them under his command. At that time, he didn't think so much. As for Luo Qingtong, it was because she was a member of the Red Flame Mercenary Group. Although Chu Xiaofeng was dissatisfied with her strength, he thought that she was alone and wouldn't hinder him from recruiting the people of the Red Flame Mercenary Group, so he didn't care too much. Who would have thought that he had picked up a treasure? Damn! No wonder when he was at the mercenary square, those people were so excited and rushed to sign up with him. Chu Xiaofeng thought that he was more charming. But it turned out that they all came for Luo Qingtong. Chu Xiaofeng's lips twitched. Fortunately, he didn't like to show off like some people, otherwise, his face would really be swollen. Then he thought of Chu Ku, who wanted to use the information on the abandoned continent to recruit Luo Qingtong and the others, and he was overjoyed. No wonder the people around him didn't give him any face and didn't even go to an ordinary mercenary group. It turned out that they had Luo Qingtong as a treasure. Chu Ku relied on Chu Yufei's prestige and wanted to poach him, but she didn't know that he had a treasure on his side. Chu Xiaofeng had no doubt that if it weren't for the family limiting the number of guards each person had, all of them would come here. These people would most likely all run over to his side, causing the rest of the Chu clan's disciples to become powerless without any support. Thinking of this, he couldn't help but laugh. Luo Qingtong had previously helped him teach the third elder and Chu Ku a lesson. She had helped the eighth elder's faction regain their face and reputation. She had even taken advantage of the victory and exposed the third elder's faction. Chu Xiaofeng had already decided that after entering the abandoned continent, he would protect Luo Qingtong. He didn't expect the other party to give him such a surprise. Perhaps he might really be able to return victorious from this trip to the abandoned continent. Even if he didn't get the sky Luo grass, he would still get a lot of it. Thinking of this, his eyes lit up. After Luo Qingtong taught the mercenaries everything she knew, she dismissed them. At this moment, she suddenly felt a strong gust of wind rushing towards her. In the next second, her belt was abruptly lifted and she was lifted into the air. Yi Qianren carried her in her arms. "I'll take her away for a while." Yi Qianxian left this sentence and disappeared with Luo Qingtong. Everyone was dumbfounded. Even Chu Xiaofeng, who was about to approach Luo Qingtong and ask her how she knew, was dumbfounded. The surroundings were so dangerous. Where was he taking her? Chapter 2500. Splash. Luo Qingtong was thrown into the river by Yi Qianming. She splashed water all over her body and her whole body was wet. "Hey! What are you doing?" Luo Qingtong's eyes widened and she pretended to be angry at Yi Qianming in the river. She had already guessed what was going on when the other party took action. Thinking that the other party suspected that she was Luo Qingtong, she was afraid that he had a certain understanding of her identity as Luo Qingtong. In this way, it was normal that he couldn't control himself when he saw her ability to see through those spiritual flowers and spiritual herbs. She didn't resist. She would let the other party see whether she was Luo Qingtong or not. Luo Qingtong's eyes were filled with anger, but Yi Qianming didn't care about her at all. He stared unblinkingly at the young man's body in the water. He watched as his body was completely soaked in the water. His clothes were all wet and stuck to his body. His thin lips were hidden behind the mask, and they were getting tighter and tighter. Luo Qingtong's figure was thin and thin. She was originally a petite girl with a curvaceous figure. But after taking the small illusion pill, she became a young man and looked very thin and weak. The clothes were pressed against her body, and soon her flat figure was revealed. Adam's apple, chest, but Yi Qianming's eyes swept over every part of Luo Qingtong's body. His eyes became deeper and deeper and he became more and more disappointed. It wasn't her. He was really possessed. Once again, he suspected that Luo Xiaoqi was a woman, Luo Qingtong. But the other party was clearly a man. Yi Qianming stared at Luo Qingtong's chest without saying a word. The latter simply took off her robe, leaving only a thin undergarment, which outlined her outline and clearly revealed her flat chest. She raised her eyebrows at Yi Qianming and said, "How is it? Have you seen enough? Am I a man or a woman? Am I the Luo Qingtong you mentioned? Do you want to take off my clothes and see?" Luo Qingtong's heart was filled with hatred. She didn't know what was going on with this person. He was fixated on her identity as Luo Qingtong. This was a good opportunity for him to see clearly, so as to avoid any future troubles. She walked out of the water and ran her fingers through her hair. She let down her wet hair. Her whole body was wet. Walking out of the river like this, she looked like a bewitching siren. However, the ferocious and ugly birthmark on her face unconsciously destroyed some of her beauty. Luo Qingtong's figure was neither fast nor slow as she walked in front of Yi Qianming. She looked up at him and crossed her arms. "Do you want to strip me naked and have a look?" "Maybe." Her lips suddenly curled up. It'll be bigger than yours if I take it out. That smile was so devilish and charming that Yi Qianming fell into a trance. It was too similar, but it wasn't. As Luo Qingtong came closer, Yi Qianming saw Luo Qingtong's flat body more clearly. His eyes were deep as he stared at Luo Qingtong's body. Then, with a swish, he disappeared in front of her. Hey! Luo Qingtong stared at his disappearing back. This person just left her behind and ran away? Damn it, how could she go back? However, Luo Qingtong also knew that the place Yi Qianming took her to was not far. As long as she waited here, Chu Xiaofeng and the others would soon find her. Therefore, she was not very anxious and just sat by the river and waited. In fact, she could go back by herself. But she had to put on a show. She was Luo Shaoqi, who had no strength. Why should she go back by herself? Chapter 2501. Damn it! Luo Qingtong stared at the two lumps that were rapidly swelling in front of her and suddenly covered her chest. MMP. The small illusory shaping pill lost its effect just like that. Luo Qingtong quickly took another small illusory shaping pill. Fortunately, she had refined a few more pills before, so she was waiting to take them when they lost their effect. However, because the small illusory shaping pill was in the abandoned continent, its aura was greatly reduced. Luo Qingtong estimated that it could only last for a few days. Damn it! When it rains, it pours. Fortunately, that man left first. At this time, Luo Qingtong was very glad that the other party left her alone. If not, her identity would definitely be exposed. But what was the other party's identity? Why did he persistently pursue her identity as Luo Qingtong? Luo Qingtong originally thought that the other party was from the Central Inscription Union, but now it didn't seem like it. The other party kept suspecting her. If he was from the Central Inscription Union, she was afraid that she would have been arrested long ago. But if not, who was the other party? While Luo Qingtong was thinking about this, she didn't notice that somewhere behind her, a pair of eyes were shocked at her change. Luo Shaoqi was a woman. Yu Mingqian's eyes changed rapidly. The eyes inside were dark and deep. He knew that Luo Shaoqi was Xiaqi, but he didn't expect her to be a woman. Thinking of the various methods that the other party had revealed in Sky Wind Inscription City, unruly and unbridled, extremely confident and unrestrained. Yu Mingqian's eyes became darker and darker. Woman, no wonder she didn't let him get close. It turned out that she was a woman. That explained it. She was afraid that his service would expose her identity, so she had been resisting his approach. Then, should he use this identity to threaten her and make her reveal information about the divine inscriptions? Yu Mingqian thought so, and his eyes turned slightly. However, he quickly dispelled this thought. The white jade masked man had been investigating Luo Shaoqi's identity. Maybe there was a relationship between them. That man was too strong, and there were too many variables. If he exposed Luo Shaoqi's identity, it might not be worth it. If the other party was not threatened by him and directly exposed his identity, and joined forces with the white jade masked man, Yu Mingqian's mind was filled with all sorts of thoughts. She quickly turned around and left. After he left, Chu Xiaofeng and the others quickly came looking for him. Little Seven, are you all right? Chu Xiaofeng and the others were relieved to see that Luo Qingtong, who was sitting by the river, was unscathed. They were shocked when Yi Qianming suddenly kidnapped Luo Qingtong. Fortunately, Bei Qing, Feng Yu and the others were there. They were not worried that Yi Qianming would harm Luo Qingtong. But why did they kidnap Luo Qingtong? Chu Xiaofeng, Guifeng, and the others were filled with questions and couldn't help but ask. Luo Qingtong's face was full of smiles. Who knows, maybe he's crazy. Am I right? She looked at Bei Qing, Feng Yu, and the others happily and asked. Bei Qing, Feng Yu, and the others were speechless. They didn't know what to say. Their master's action just now was indeed a bit sudden. They looked at Luo Qingtong's wet clothes and probably knew what their master was thinking. Alas! Master, why did you do this? Chapter 2502. Bei Qing, Feng Yu, and the others sighed in their hearts. Looking at Luo Qingtong, Feng Yu stepped forward and apologized. I'm sorry, young master Shao Qi. My madam is missing and our young master is too anxious, so he's in a bad mood. If he offended you in any way, please forgive him. Madam? Luo Qingtong's eyes seemed to have caught something in an instant and looked towards Feng Yu. Is your young master surnamed Yi? She almost asked, but in the end, she forced herself to hold it back. She carefully examined the other party, not sure if they were Feng Yu and the others. But the other party said that the person just now was their young master and Luo Qingtong was their madam. Luo Qingtong really couldn't stop thinking about it. Her eyes turned and her mind flashed with Yi Qianming's every move when he checked her identity. Her heart became happier and happier. That stupid man. Luo Qingtong didn't know whether to laugh or cry at Yi Qianming's actions. It was such a simple thing, but he made it so complicated. As long as he said that he was Yi Qianming, how could she deny her identity? But he didn't say it. However, Luo Qingtong also saw something unusual in the way Yi Qianming and the others hid their identities. Although she didn't know why they were here and why they had to hide their identities, they must have their reasons. Therefore, even if Luo Qingtong had guessed Yi Qianming's identity, she still suppressed the joy in her heart. She didn't expose Yi Qianming's identity on the spot. But the corners of her mouth and the light in her eyes couldn't be suppressed. What's the matter? Your young master hasn't come back yet? Looking at Bei Qing, Feng Yu, and the others, Luo Qingtong could tell at a glance that Yi Qianming wasn't among them. Speaking of which, it was quite funny. She clearly had a special feeling for men, but because he was probing her, she ignored it again and again. The two of them were fools. They missed each other time and time again. Really? Luo Qingtong's face was covered in blood when she thought about how she had deliberately let Yi Qianming see her flat chest and told him that if she took it out, it might be bigger than his. It was simply, other than asking if she was Luo Qingtong, couldn't that damned man ask a few more questions? For instance, the true Spill Continent or Little Silver? What a stubborn man. However, Luo Qingtong also knew that at that time, Yi Qianming probably didn't think so much. He only wanted to confirm whether she was Luo Qingtong or not. And at that time, she was in the appearance of a man, so in his disappointment, he naturally wouldn't ask any more questions. However, even if she looked like a man, Yi Qianming would still pay attention to her and suspect her. This made Luo Qingtong's heart full. Her lips were slightly raised and her eyes were almost curved into a crescent moon. Her heart was filled with indescribable satisfaction and happiness. If he didn't care and love her too much, with Yi Qianming's arrogant and cold temperament, how could he suspect that the boy was her again and again? And it was after seeing the characteristics of a man on her body. That silly man. Luo Qingtong couldn't wait to see Yi Qianming. However, the latter wasn't in the group, which made her anxious. Her attitude changed too quickly. Chapter 2503. My young master hasn't come back yet. I guess he went to investigate first. Feng Yu answered without missing a single detail. Although he didn't know why Luo Qingtong asked this question, he still answered carefully. The other party gave him the same feeling as the evil doctor. Unfortunately, the identity of the other party was destined not to be the evil doctor. Master should have completely given up. If he didn't vent his anger, he probably wouldn't come back. Sigh, what was love? It made people want to live and die together. Feng Yu and the others saw that their master was in a bad mood and felt bad. It was just that the identity of the evil doctor was difficult to investigate, so they couldn't do anything. From another point of view, this also proved that the evil doctor was very safe. Thinking of this, they felt a lot more at ease. It was just that their master suffered. Luo Qingtong knew that they had a different feeling with Yi Qianming, so she didn't ask any more questions. As long as they were here, that man would eventually come back. But why did they appear here incognito? Why didn't they reveal their identities when they suspected her identity? Did they encounter some danger? Luo Qingtong asked Bei Qing and Feng Yu indirectly. Bei Qing was easy to get information from, but Feng Yu wasn't so easy to deal with. However, Luo Qingtong still got a lot of information from them. They seemed to be hiding from some enemy. Luo Qingtong frowned. She left True Spill Continent a long time ago, so she didn't know what happened to Yi Qianming. But from the other party's strength, it seemed that the people who could make Yi Qianming and the others hide were from their side. She thought of the big trouble she provoked from the Central Inscription Master Union and was speechless for a moment. Were the two of them a match made in heaven? Both of them had provoked a great enemy of each other. But this enemy of hers was much more troublesome than Yi Qianming's side. Yi Qianming's people wouldn't do anything to him, but if he met the people from the Central Inscription Master Union, Luo Qingtong frowned and decided to hide her identity for the time being. She would never allow Yi Qianming to be involved in her grievances. That man loved her as much as his life, so she naturally had to love him and protect him. Her current status was well hidden. As long as she returned to the True Spill Continent, she would be able to rid herself of the Central Inscription Union. There was no need to expose herself ahead of time and involve Yi Qianming and the others. Of course, Luo Qingtong also had a guilty conscience. Thinking about how she had denied her identity time and time again and how she had played tricks on Yi Qianming, she felt a toothache. She would wait until she left this abandoned continent and prepared to return to the True Spill Continent. Then, she would tell this man who she was. By then, his anger would definitely dissipate. Luo Qingtong thought and took out Yi Qianming's clothes for the first time. She carefully studied how to insert the needle. She didn't know how to needlework and hadn't planned to sew the dress. She was only thinking about how to get away with it. Now that she knew that the other party was Yi Qianming, how could she still have such thoughts? Try your best to make amends. She hoped that when her identity was exposed, that man would forgive her on account of all the hard work she had put in. Luo Qingtong thought and felt a burst of bitterness in her heart. Chu Xiaofeng and the others saw that she didn't care about Yi Qianxian kidnapping her and even took out Yi Qianxian's clothes to study. Chapter 2504. Yi Qianming didn't leave for too long. He was extremely self-restrained. Previously, it was because Luo Qingtong revealed her ability to see through the surrounding medicinal herbs in public that he couldn't control himself for a while. Later, he completely confirmed Luo Qingtong's identity as a man. Then he thought that Luo Qingtong's ability to see through the medicinal herbs was entirely due to her meticulous observation, which was different from that woman's ability to see through everything. He immediately calmed down. After venting outside, he restrained his aura and returned to the team. Except for Luo Qingtong, Bei Qing, Feng Yu and others, no one else noticed the strong blood aura lingering around his body. Luo Qingtong looked at the strong blood aura on his body and knew that he went out to vent. This time, it was estimated that many demon plants and magical beasts were unlucky. But this man abused the power in his body like this. Could his strength support it? Could his meridians bear it? Why did the Shifang dragon ring in his hand disappear? What happened during this period of time? Luo Qingtong had a lot of questions to ask Yi Qianming. But because she had decided not to involve Yi Qianming in her grievances, she couldn't ask anything at this time. She could only look at him with a smile and greet him, "Hey, brother, you're back?" She still had the same playful attitude and casual words. Yi Qianming glanced at her and ignored her. He had completely accepted the fact that Luo Qingtong was not Luo Qingtong and was not going to pay attention to her. Even if she gave him the feeling that she was Luo Qingtong, she was not Luo Qingtong. What's more, Yi Qianming's pride did not allow him to find a substitute to replace Luo Qingtong when she was not here. Even if this person was very similar. It was impossible. He ignored Luo Qingtong. After receiving Feng Yu's hint, he said to Chu Xiaofeng and others, "There is not much danger ahead, we can go." Because all the dangers had just been eliminated by him. Everyone followed his words and walked forward. Along the way, they didn't see any magical beasts or demon plants. However, the worst part was that there wasn't even a single spiritual flower or spiritual grass. Could it be that because the team in front of them had passed by, all the spiritual flowers and spiritual herbs had been plucked out? Everyone guessed. But there were no signs of fighting in the surroundings. What the hell? Everyone felt gloomy. Especially Chu Xiaofeng. He was still counting on Luo Qingtong's terrifying observation skills to harvest a good harvest in the vicinity. One had to know that getting Luo Qingtong was a huge gain for him. On this abandoned continent, one could only replenish their strength through spiritual flowers and spiritual grasses. According to Chu Xiaofeng's original calculations, it would take a lot of effort for him to obtain enough spiritual flowers and herbs to replenish his energy and bring out a considerable amount of spiritual flowers and herbs at the same time. It could even cause great casualties to the team. After all, in Tianfeng Chu's family, there were many guards like him. Especially those top disciples, there was no need to even mention them. Except for Chu Lingfeng, who had rejected the guards. The guards assigned to the others were only stronger than him, and not weaker than him. In this case, it was very difficult for him to stand out. But who told him to get Luo Qingtong now? With the support of this young man, he would definitely get the most spiritual flowers and spiritual grasses. Chu Xiaofeng had already discussed with Luo Qingtong. As long as she found spiritual flowers and spiritual grasses, he would buy them with resources from her. Chapter 2505. Luo Qingtong didn't care. Chu Xiaofeng's proposal was beneficial to her. This abandoned continent was a high-level continent with a vast area. There were so many spirit flowers and spirit grasses that Luo Qingtong couldn't pick them all. She didn't need to refuse Chu Xiaofeng's proposal. This deal was beneficial to her. The resources of the Tianfeng Chu family were very useful to her. Not only would she be able to use them, but her subordinates would also be able to use them when she returned to the true Spill continent. These were cultivation resources that others couldn't even buy with money. Luo Qingtong was still regretting that she had left Tianfeng Inscription City in a hurry and didn't get anything good from Song City. Now that Chu Xiaofeng had delivered himself to her door, she didn't need to reject him. Chu Xiaofeng was doing this in order to befriend Luo Qingtong. This youth had such ability at such a young age. Perhaps he would need her help in the future. Not to mention, these cultivation resources were not worth mentioning compared to the Tianfeng Chu family's benefits. As long as he could bring back a large number of spirit flowers and spirit grasses, he would be able to suppress the other Tianfeng Chu family's disciples. This was something that couldn't be compared to. Chu Xiaofeng was very clear about this point. However, they didn't find any traces of spirit flowers or spirit grasses along the way. Chu Xiaofeng's face instantly turned green. They had better not walk into a dead land without any spiritual energy. That would be a trap. After all, this abandoned continent had been abandoned for a long time. Even if the heart of the continent suddenly changed and the heavenly grass was born, not all places on the abandoned continent could benefit from it. There were always dead ends where no spiritual energy or energy of the great Tao could reach. Chu Xiaofeng thought that they had encountered such a place. However, only Luo Qingtong, Feng Yu, and Bei Qing knew what was going on. Oh my God, this wastrel. Luo Qingtong's eyes looked at the dissipating spiritual energy and the power of demon beasts and plants. The corners of her mouth twitched. How was this a dead land? It was clearly the result of a man venting his anger. Should she be glad that no matter how depressed or angry this man was, he didn't do anything to her? Luo Qingtong was embarrassed and unconsciously looked at Yi Qianming. The latter no longer stared at her from time to time and probed her like before. But Luo Qingtong hoped that he would look at her like before. Only then would she be able to get close to him. This man's unapproachable manner was too troublesome. Luo Qingtong dawdled and finally came to Yi Qianming's side. Cough, brother. Luo Qingtong only realized that she still didn't know Yi Qianxin's name. This man was investigating her identity everywhere, but he didn't even mention her name. Even if he said something that was slightly related to his name, he would still be able to recognize him. He was investigating her in the middle of the night without any identification. Furthermore, she was being investigated. It would be strange if she admitted her identity. Luo Qingtong was angry and amused at the same time. But now that she knew Yi Qianxian's identity, it didn't matter if he told her his name or not. It was quite good to call him brother like this. Luo Qingtong thought so, and her lips curled up slightly. She immediately continued to harass Yi Qianxian. Yi Qianxian didn't want to pay attention to her at first. He let her shout. But her voice was too noisy and annoying. He endured and endured, but in the end, he couldn't stand it anymore. What the hell do you want? He looked at the young man in front of him coldly. Chapter 2506. It's about your wife. Hearing Luo Qingtong's words, Yi Qianxian's eyes darkened. My wife? He narrowed his eyes and looked at Luo Qingtong. Yes. He said it. Your wife. You're the one who suspects me to be her. Luo Qingtong pointed at Feng Yu and sold him out without hesitation. Yi Qianxian looked at Feng Yu expressionlessly. Moss. Young master, Feng Yu looked at the pair of cold eyes behind her master's mask. She was about to cry because of Luo Qingtong's miraculous move. Why was Luo Shaoqi as unpredictable as the evil doctor? He was clearly trying to explain his master's sudden actions to her, so why did it sound like he had nothing better to do and was gossiping with her? Feng Yu was about to cry because of his master's eyes. Master, I didn't mean to leak it. Fortunately, Yi Qianxian knew his character and knew that he was not a gossipy person. Bei Qing might be tricked by Luo Shaoqi, but it was impossible for Feng Yu. Therefore, after staring at him for a while, she looked away and didn't say anything. Why do you ask about her? Yi Qianxian stared at Luo Qingtong. He had just vented his anger and now his mood had calmed down. But this time, because of Luo Qingtong's question, it stirred up waves of ripples. She had originally intended to ignore Luo Qingtong, but she still asked this question out of curiosity. Oh, ask what kind of person she is. I can't believe you care about me so much. I am a man. How can you mistake me for her? Are we really that alike? Luo Qingtong asked with interest. She just wanted to find a topic to get close to Yi Qianxian. But given the man's unapproachable aura, if it was not a topic he was interested in, he would never talk to her. Therefore, Luo Qingtong used her identity as an opening remark. However, at this moment, her interest was piqued. She also wanted to know why this person was so obsessed with her. He was a man now, and there was a huge birthmark on his face. His appearance and gender had changed. Why did he think that she was Luo Qingtong? And he checked her again and again. Luo Qingtong's face was full of excitement. Yi Qianren looked at the excited expression on her face and the bright light in her eyes. She unconsciously closed her eyes and looked away. Even her curious expression made him feel that it was so similar. But no matter how similar it was not her. Thinking of the scene he saw by the river before, Yi Qianxian's eyes turned cold. My wife has a peerless appearance, unparalleled beauty, and is the most cunning and domineering. The reason why I mistook you for her is because your name and ability are similar to hers. It has nothing to do with you. She was a man. She could not be Luo Qingtong. Luo Qingtong did not know whether to be angry or laugh at Yi Qianxian's words. This man. She gritted her teeth. Wasn't he telling her not to think too highly of herself and that his wife was not similar to her at all? It really made her want to hit him. But thinking that the wife he was praising was her, Luo Qingtong felt sweet in her heart. This man was too much. He had always been stingy with his sweet words to her, but he said them so smoothly to others. Chapter 2507. Oh. So that's how it is. Luo Qingtong said with a smile, I thought your wife looked very similar to me. That's why you kept mistaking me for someone else. Since we've cleared up the misunderstanding, then don't keep me at arm's length. If there's any danger later, you have to protect me well. After all, no matter how different your wife and I are, at least in terms of ability, we're still a little similar. How about this? I'll provide you with spiritual flowers and spiritual herbs for free, and you protect me. Luo Qingtong looked at Yi Qianming, who looked at her coldly. You don't lack protection. She was now in high demand in Chu Xiaofeng's eyes. The other people in Mercenary City would also protect her, so she wouldn't encounter too much danger here. Nonsense. Luo Qingtong heard his words and cursed in her heart. Of course I don't lack protection. But I don't lack protection. What's more, the spiritual energy in this abandoned continent was completely useless. Luo Qingtong didn't know if Yi Qianming and the others came here for her or the Tianluo grass. But since Yi Qianming came to check her identity in the middle of the night and found out that she was a man, she guessed that they should be here for the Tianluo grass. Otherwise, they would have given up and left at that time. Luo Qingtong thought about it and felt quite lucky. Tianfeng Chu's mission came at the right time. Otherwise, Yi Qianming and the others would have left long ago. How would she know their identity? Not only that, Yi Qianming left True Spill Continent and hid from his enemies. When she left Tianfeng region in the future, they would really miss each other. Thinking of this, Luo Qingtong naturally wanted to tie Yi Qianming and the others to her side. She just clarified her identity as a woman by the river. Yi Qianming could see clearly that he would never pester her again. And he came for the Tianluo grass. Luo Qingtong thought about it and was still worried that Yi Qianming and the others would leave. After all, with their strength, there was no need for them to follow Chu Xiaofeng and the others. After coming here, they would definitely leave immediately. The reason why they didn't leave before was most likely because they still doubted her identity. However, this would remove all his suspicions, so why would he stay? Luo Qingtong was worried about his health. At the same time, she finally knew that he was her man. How could she let him go? Of course, he had to think of a way to make him stay. Luo Qingtong thought and suddenly sighed, even if that's the case, who doesn't leave a few more paths for themselves? Look at my small and frail body. If Chu Xiaofeng goes back on his word, the other mercenaries may not be able to protect me. What's more, this is Tianfeng Chu family's territory. Once we're outside, what if my secret is accidentally leaked and the Tianfeng Chu family wants to take advantage of it? At that time, won't I be captured by them and imprisoned day and night just to help them identify those medicinal herbs and tools? Luo Qingtong exaggerated the story. In fact, since she dared to expose herself, she wasn't afraid that the Tianfeng Chu family would covet her. She naturally had a way to escape, but she couldn't say that in front of Yi Qianming. He had to make it sound as miserable as possible. Otherwise, how could she blame them? Sure enough, after hearing her words, Yi Qianming fell silent. After a while, he said coldly, then it doesn't have to be us. Yi Qianming indeed had the intention to leave. Chapter 2508. Most importantly, he didn't want to see Luo Qingtong again. He didn't want her to disturb his mood. He was just thinking about leaving, but he didn't expect Luo Qingtong to make such a request. The words spoken by the other party caused his heart to skip a beat. Because Luo Qingtong once said the same thing. When she was in the True Spill Continent, she said that once her ability was exposed, she would get into endless trouble. Although Luo Xiaoqi's ability was not as good as hers, if the Tianfeng Chu family or the Flying Star Lian family really had evil intentions, she really couldn't escape. Thinking of this, Yi Qianming felt uncomfortable. Even if he knew that Luo Xiaoqi was not Luo Qingtong, he didn't need to care about her. But when he thought that she might be imprisoned and oppressed by others, he couldn't help but feel a burst of anger in his heart. It was probably because Luo Xiaoqi's ability was similar to Luo Qingtong's. But even if she had such concerns, why did she choose them? Wasn't she afraid that they would sell her out? Yi Qianming looked at Luo Qingtong coldly. The latter had already thought of an excuse and immediately said, because only you are worthy of my trust. You see, you are outsiders. You don't have to be afraid of the Tianfeng Chu family and can easily leave. Most importantly, your wife's ability is similar to mine, or even more powerful than mine. In this case, why do you still need to covet my ability? So, of course I choose you. When Luo Qingtong said this, Yi Qianming had to admit that she was right. In this case, they would stay first. Enough spiritual flowers and spiritual herbs were indeed beneficial for them to compete for the Tian Luo grass later. Although Yi Qianming and the others were strong. But at the same time, it consumed a lot of energy to attack. If Luo Xiaoqi could provide them with enough spiritual flowers and spiritual herbs, it would indeed save them a lot of trouble. Of course, the most important reason was that Yi Qianming subconsciously didn't want anything to happen to Luo Qingtong. After hearing her frightening words, he gave up on the idea of leaving. Seeing that Yi Qianming didn't speak, Luo Qingtong suddenly smiled, knowing that she had succeeded. This man shouldn't be leaving. The next step would be to gather as many spiritual flowers and spiritual herbs as possible for them. In case this man did not have enough power in his body. It was a pity that she couldn't check his body right now. Otherwise, she could have secretly checked his body. However, it was fine. She would think of another way on the way. Anyway, there was plenty of time. As long as he was by her side, there was no need to be afraid that he couldn't think of a way. However, her current strength was still a little low. It would be best for her to show Yi Qianxian when she was stronger. Thinking of this, Luo Qingtong frowned. She now knew that Yi Qianxian was after the Tian Luo grass. If that was the case, she probably couldn't take it anymore. He had to start from other areas to see if he could increase his strength. Fortunately, there were many spirit flowers and spirit herbs on this abandoned continent. Apart from being able to replenish one's energy, they could also increase one's strength. It was just that her most important obstacle was breaking through the barrier of the Venerable Realm, nothing else. It was a pity that Hum had returned to the 9 stories exquisite pagoda and said that it wanted to recuperate and restore its strength, so as not to be weak all the time. Otherwise, she could ask it. Luo Qingtong thought about these things. Soon, the group walked past the area where Yi Qianxian was wreaking havoc. Chapter 2509. He was really afraid that they would go to the wrong place. If they really went to a place where the spirit qi was cut off, where even the great Dao qi nurtured by the Tian Luo grass did not visit, they would be in trouble. They would have to go back and find another direction. He did not know how much time they would waste. The Tian Luo grass on this abandoned continent was nurtured in the heart of the continent. The disciples of the Tianfeng Chu clan and the Flying Star Lian clan did not know the exact location. This was because the heart of the continent was located in a different place on each continent. Not only that, but it would also constantly move around the continent as time passed. The Tianfeng Chu clan and the Flying Star Lian clan had discovered the existence of the Tian Luo grass. However, because the two clans kept each other in check, no one was able to obtain the Tian Luo grass. By the time they sent their disciples here, the location of the heart of the continent would have changed. They had to continue searching in this abandoned continent. At the same time, this was also a training for the disciples of the clans. However, the Flying Star Lian clan and the Tianfeng Chu clan would not let their disciples wander aimlessly in this abandoned continent. Although they had sealed off the news on this abandoned continent, it did not mean that they could completely hide the truth from the masses. The longer they delayed, the more disadvantageous it would be for them. Therefore, they had calculated the time and brought their disciples here this time. The heart of the continent would erupt with a spirit qi tide every year. At that time, it would reveal its location. This time, the Tianfeng Chu clan and the Flying Star Lian clan had sent their disciples here just in the vicinity of this time. It was estimated that in a few days, the spirit qi tide would erupt. At that time, the heart of the continent would be revealed. The Tian Luo grass would also be revealed. Therefore, Chu Xiaofeng did not want to waste too much time. Fortunately, this proved that the direction they were heading in was not a dead end. He immediately felt relieved and quickly threw himself into the battle against the demonic beasts and monster plants. The living creatures on this abandoned continent were very strange. Because all the humans had left, the demonic beasts and monster plants that remained did not have the ability to survive. They could only take root here. However, in order to adapt to life here, they had completely mutated. They fed on the decaying spirit qi and carried corrosive spirit qi all over their bodies. As soon as the spirit qi came into contact with the attacks of Chu Xiaofeng and the others, it would be eliminated and weakened. Even if Chu Xiaofeng was at the same level of strength, he would be suppressed to less than half of his strength. Not only that, but their spiritual energy consumption was also not on the same level as these magical beasts and demonic plants. The more they used it, the less energy they had. Those demonic beasts and demonic plants were completely different. They could absorb the decaying spirit qi in the air to replenish themselves, so their strength was not affected at all. For a moment, Chu Xiaofeng and the others were in a sorry state. Only now did they realize how rare it was for them to walk through such a safe journey. Then how did it happen? It could actually make all the demonic beasts and plants disappear. Even the spirit flowers and spirit herbs were gone. No matter how they thought about it, they couldn't figure it out. None of them thought of Yi Qianxian. After all, it was too frightening. He cleared a path without any danger by himself. That was simply a fantasy story. None of them even thought of that. Chapter 25:10. Yi Qianxian and the others stood beside her, not intending to make a move. But their reason was to protect Luo Qingtong. Chu Xiaofeng and the others had no opinion. Only Luo Qingtong knew that Yi Qianxian and the others actually disdained to make a move. Especially Yi Qianxian. If he made a move, the surrounding magical beasts and monster plants would all be gone. Luo Qingtong also agreed that Yi Qianxian and the others should not make a move. First, Yi Qianxian's meridians had problems. If they could not make a move, then they should not make a move. After all, this was not a low-level continent like the true Spill continent. These magical beasts and monster plants were not easy to deal with. If they made a move too much, what would they do if Yi Qianxian's meridians were injured? Second, these magical beasts and monster plants were very suitable for gaining experience. If they were all killed by Yi Qianxian and the others, Luo Qingtong and the others would not be able to gain experience. Therefore, she was inclined to not let Yi Qianxian and the others make a move. If they made a move, she would also stop them. Fortunately, the latter and the others did not have the idea of exposing their strength. When Chu Xiaofeng and the others were forced to retreat by the magical beasts and monster plants in front of them, Luo Qingtong had already investigated the nearby terrain. She already had a way to deal with it. Everything had its nemesis, especially these magical beasts and monster plants. Because they lived in the same place for a long time, their natural enemies were almost always nearby. Luo Qingtong's eyes scanned the area and soon found some useful things in the surroundings. Big Brother Gu, you guys retreat. Except for the rest of the Red Flame Mercenary Corps, spread out to the side. Do you see that small slope? Run over there. Then lead those magical beasts and monster plants there. Luo Qingtong and the others encountered a group of magical beasts and monster plants. These magical beasts and monster plants each guarded a piece of spiritual grass behind them. It seemed that there were about a dozen of them. At this moment, under Luo Qingtong's command, the group of mercenaries only stared blankly for a moment before running towards the hollow she mentioned. They had long been used to listening to Luo Qingtong. After all, in Mercenary City, Luo Qingtong's words were always accurate. It didn't matter if it was a mission plan or something else. Chu Xiaofeng, on the other hand, stood there in a daze. He was originally prepared to rush over with Gui Feng and the others. However, Gui Feng and the others listened to Luo Qingtong's words and retreated. He faced the demonic beasts and monster plants alone and cursed in his heart. These people were simply crazy. Who was the employer here? If it was before he had seen Luo Qingtong's ability, he would have cursed and even used the agreement to punish Gui Feng and the others. But at this moment, she knew that Luo Qingtong would not speak carelessly. He suppressed his temper and didn't say anything. But shouldn't he at least give him some orders? How could she forget about him alone? Luo Xiaoqi, you can't be so biased, right? Did she want him to fight against these magical beasts and monster plants alone? Chu Xiaofeng's face turned green. Just as he was about to run with Gui Feng and the others, Luo Qingtong's voice rang in his ears at this moment. Don't move. Don't move your ass. Those magical beasts and monster plants were about to rush over. If he went against them like this, he would definitely die without a complete corpse. Chu Xiaofeng's face didn't even turn green. It was completely blue, okay? Chapter 25:11. Damn it. Let's fight. He gritted his teeth fiercely and stood there motionless. He was going to bet. He was going to bet that Luo Xiaoqi wouldn't kill him. When Luo Qingtong spoke, seeing that Chu Xiaofeng was about to run, Yi Qianxian suddenly moved his hands in his sleeves to stop him. Yi Qianxian didn't know why he did this. When Luo Xiaoqi spoke, he naturally wanted to cooperate with her actions. Just like in the past, he and Luo Qingtong cooperated with each other. But the one standing in front of him now was not Luo Qingtong, but Luo Xiaoqi. Yi Qianming's eyes were complicated. He looked at Chu Xiaofeng, who had already stood in front of him, and withdrew the power lingering around his fingertips. But his heart couldn't calm down. Luo Qingtong didn't know this at all. Her eyes were fixed on Chu Xiaofeng. 1, 2, 3. Luo Qingtong counted silently in her heart. Seeing that those magical beasts and demon plants were about to collide with Chu Xiaofeng, she said in a deep voice, "Brother Gu, grab the green grass next to you, crush it into liquid, and splash it." As her voice sounded, Gui Feng and the others pulled up the grass around them in an instant. These grass were very inconspicuous, almost ankle-high, and green all over, the kind that was a little scary. If it weren't for Luo Qingtong's reminder, they might not have noticed it. Because this grass was neither a spiritual herb nor a demon plant. In their eyes, it was useless. But since Luo Qingtong had spoken, everyone did as she said. They uprooted the green grass and crushed them into juice. Then, they raised their hands and scattered the juice. Bang! A large amount of green liquid splashed on Chu Xiaofeng, instantly turning him into a green man. The kind that was green from head to toe. Above his head, there was a green grass that was swaying in the wind, stretching its body and swaying back and forth above his head. Cough, cough, sorry, it was a mistake. Hu Zhan scratched his head in embarrassment. He was too nervous just now, so he didn't even crush the grass completely before throwing it out. He missed a blade of grass. Everyone looked at him and wanted to laugh but couldn't. On the other side, Chu Xiaofeng resisted the urge to curse. He didn't have time to raise his hand and pull down the grass on his head before those magical beasts and demon plants arrived. Rumble. Those magical beasts were like thousands of galloping horses as they charged towards him. Meanwhile, those monster plants were waving their huge and thick branches. They took bold steps and rumbled like a bulldozer as they charged towards him. Chu Xiaofeng closed his eyes. However, as soon as those magical beasts and demon plants approached him, they let out mournful cries. In an instant, the demonic beasts and demonic plants that were about to collide with him all screeched sharply and came to a sudden halt. Their attacks and collisions were all deflected to one side. Not only that, but it was also as if it had lost its mind, as it madly screamed and attacked. Let's attack. Force them to the place where the small depression is. Luo Qingtong's voice came at this time. Immediately, the other three mercenary corps, who were stunned by the scene at the depression, took action and drove the group of magical beasts and demon plants over. Gui Feng and the others were about to go over to help, but they found that as soon as they went over, those magical beasts and demon plants became even crazier. They even vaguely looked like they were going to escape at all costs. They had no choice but to stand in place and watch the three mercenary corps drive all those magical beasts and demon plants to the depression and kill them. The whole process took less than 15 minutes. Chapter 25:12. Everyone was dumbfounded and couldn't believe it. Shao Qi, how did you do it? Chu Xiaofeng cleaned himself up and walked over. He was going to die. What the hell was this green juice? Why couldn't he get rid of it? Chu Xiaofeng's face turned green, and he walked over with a dirty head. Luo Qingtong looked at his embarrassed appearance and smiled, then raised her hand and pointed to a place not far away and said, "Here, use that soil to wipe it, and it will be wiped off." Chu Xiaofeng was happy to hear that, but when he looked back, his face darkened. Not for anything else, but the mucus and dirt left by those magical beasts and monster plants were everywhere on the soil. Oh my God! You want to use that to wipe it? With a dirty face, Chu Xiaofeng asked Luo Qingtong 3 times in a row and got the same answer, so he could only run over. When Gui Feng and others saw this scene, they immediately rejoiced. They were not the ones who were used as fish hooks by Luo Qingtong to hang those magical beasts and monster plants. But how did Luo Qingtong do it? How did she know that the juice of those grasses could restrain those magical beasts and monster plants? Luo Qingtong looked at the doubts on their faces and didn't keep them in suspense. She answered them with a chuckle, "Didn't you notice? These magical beasts and monster plants have lived here for so long, guarding the spiritual grasses behind them. The weeds nearby have almost been ruined by them. But these green grasses are close to them, so how can they be spared? Also, when you were fighting with them just now, someone accidentally stepped back and stepped on those weeds, and his feet were stained with the juice. Those magical beasts and monster plants suddenly stopped attacking him and turned to other people. And when he walked over, they even avoided him in disgust." Luo Qingtong pointed to a person in the Red Flame mercenary group. The latter recalled in amazement and found that it seemed to be true. He had been rushing in front and following the leader. But even Hu Zhan was besieged in the back. He seemed to be fine. He thought it was just luck. It seemed that it was because of the liquid, but Luo Shaoqi actually noticed such a small thing? There were so many of them. How sharp were her eyes? Everyone's faces were filled with admiration. Yi Qianming listened to the explanation of Luo Qingtong and the people of the Red Flame mercenary group and suddenly felt dispirited. Luo Shaoqi and Luo Qingtong's abilities were indeed somewhat similar, but Luo Shaoqi's ability could be seen by anyone who had eyes and was willing to observe carefully. It was just that the average person didn't have her observational skills. However, Qingtong's ability was different. It was unique in this world. Yi Qianming pursed his lips and felt that there was something wrong with him. He had already confirmed that Luo Qingtong was not Luo Qingtong. Why did he keep having this misconception? What was going on? Yi Qianming pursed his lips. Bei Qing and Feng Yu were also surprised by Luo Shaoqi's ability. Who would have thought that there was someone in this world who could match the evil doctor's abilities? Although the evil doctor's ability was obviously stronger. But this Luo Shaoqi's ability was obviously more practical. They looked at the place where Luo Qingtong was and could understand why Yi Qianming always mistook Luo Shaoqi for Luo Qingtong. They were too similar. Especially the aura of strategizing. And the means and methods of the layout. Everyone shook their heads. Chapter 25:13. The group of people continued to move forward. They had already picked the spiritual herbs guarded by the magical beasts and plants. Everyone found these spiritual herbs together, so they were divided equally. With Luo Qingtong around, Chu Xiaofeng was not stingy. There were a lot of spiritual herbs just now. If it weren't for Luo Qingtong, they might have lost some. Therefore, each family took out a spiritual herb and gave it to Luo Qingtong. Yi Qianming and the others also got a spiritual herb because they were guarding Luo Qingtong. Luo Qingtong received these spiritual herbs excitedly. Then before Chu Xiaofeng could speak, she raised her hand and stuffed these spiritual herbs in her hand to Yi Qianming. Here, your protection fee. Actually, it was her compensation and alimony. Luo Qingtong planned seriously. If she continued to support Yi Qianming like this, when she left here, would this man forgive her for not admitting her identity? Luo Qingtong thought about it over and over again, and then tragically realized that it seemed impossible. This man was not so easy to bribe. Ah. Toothache. Luo Qingtong was gloomily calculating. Yi Qianming looked at the pile of spiritual herbs in his arms and inexplicably couldn't come back to his senses. Why did he feel that there was something wrong with the current situation? It's too much. His voice was cold and he took back some of the spiritual herbs in his hand and gave some to Luo Qingtong. The other party asked them to protect her and give them spiritual herbs for free. But they clearly didn't protect her just now. Because Luo Qingtong was not in danger. He could take some, but not all. Yes, yes, yes. Chu Xiaofeng nodded desperately. He was still hoping to exchange some from Luo Qingtong. This guy should at least leave some for him. What's right? Luo Qingtong glared at him, then looked at Yi Qianming and said, anyway, when we are in danger, I will still give you these spiritual herbs. Just take it. This is the deal we agreed on. Why was this man so dawdling? She gave it to him and he used it. He even rejected the things that were sent to his door. If he didn't save some to replenish his strength in the future, what would he do if he encountered danger? Luo Qingtong was not worried that she would run out of spiritual flowers and spiritual grasses. She could take them at any time, but Yi Qianming and the others couldn't. She had to prepare more. Yi Qianming was caught off guard and was once again stuffed by her. The veins on his forehead twitched. Forget it, I'll just keep it. It's just some spiritual herbs. When he left the abandoned continent in the future, he would ask the people from the underworld palace to send the corresponding resources to the Red Flame mercenary group. Yi Qianming never took advantage of others. He would just treat the extra spiritual herbs as if he had bought them from Luo Xiaoqi like Chu Xiaofeng did. Thinking of this, he gave these spiritual herbs to Feng Yu and told him to keep them well. The group continued to move forward. Originally, Chu Xiaofeng was a little depressed that he didn't get those spiritual herbs from Luo Qingtong's hands. As a result, along the way, Luo Qingtong found countless spiritual herbs. It couldn't even be described as plucking feathers from geese. Almost everywhere they went, Luo Qingtong could predict what spiritual flowers and spiritual herbs would be in advance and let Chu Xiaofeng and the others pick them. When encountering magical beasts and demon plants, Chu Xiaofeng and the others would deal with them alone or in small numbers. When encountering more magical beasts and demon plants, Luo Qingtong's observation skills came in handy. She was always able to meticulously discover every single flaw in the battlefield. Chapter 25:14. With her around, Chu Xiaofeng and the others were no longer restrained when facing those magical beasts and monster plants. And the advantage of those magical beasts and monster plants was not as strong as before. When they adapted to the attacks of these magical beasts and monster plants, the following battles would be easier. Along the way, the group completely uprooted the mountains and turned over the trees. There was no spiritual flower or spiritual grass that could escape their search. Under such circumstances, Chu Xiaofeng didn't care that Luo Qingtong gave her spiritual flowers and spiritual grass to Yi Qianming and the others. After all, Luo Qingtong needed protection. Yi Qianming and the others deserved to get those spiritual flowers and spiritual grass. And Chu Xiaofeng didn't expect that Luo Qingtong's ability was so powerful that she could lead them to find so many spiritual flowers and spiritual grass. Although Luo Qingtong didn't give him those spiritual flowers and spiritual grass, he still gave her the corresponding resources according to the frequency that Luo Qingtong found those spiritual flowers and spiritual grass. After all, the frequency that Luo Qingtong found those spiritual flowers and spiritual grass was too high. If it weren't for Luo Qingtong, they wouldn't have been able to get so many spiritual flowers and spiritual grass. In fact, if it weren't for Luo Qingtong's lack of strength, those spiritual flowers and spiritual grass she found should have been hers. Thinking so, Chu Xiaofeng was willing to give these resources. And because Yi Qianming and the others had the spiritual flowers and spiritual grass that Luo Qingtong gave them, they didn't have to fight along the way but still got a lot of harvest. Bei Qing, Feng Yu, and the others calculated and found that even if they left and searched on their own, the spiritual flowers and spiritual grass they got would not be as much as what Luo Qingtong gave them. And this was under the condition that they were strong and not afraid of those magical beasts and monster plants. The young man's ability was too powerful. In this abandoned continent, he was simply like a fish in water. And what made Bei Qing, Feng Yu, and the others even more embarrassed was that they were inexplicably living off of a woman. They didn't do anything and got a lot of things. Well, if not for the previous battle where a monster plant suddenly went berserk and almost kidnapped Luo Xiaoqi and was then killed by them, they really could be considered to have done nothing. Everyone's hearts were filled with a sense of helplessness. They felt like they had been taken care of by someone. At this moment, the sky ahead had already turned dark. Night fell. At night, the demonic beasts and demonic plants would become even more violent. Moreover, many of those spiritual flowers and spiritual herbs would also hide at night. There was no need to rush at night. Chu Xiaofeng and the others had already gained a lot during the day. Everyone was very tired now. Seeing that the sky had darkened, they stopped and began to set up camp. Luo Qingtong chose a good place for everyone to rest. The terrain there was dangerous, easy to defend and hard to attack, so there was no fear of being ambushed at night. In addition, Luo Qingtong also used the corpses of the magical beasts and demonic plants to mix with the weeds to make a powder that could cover everyone's scent, and sprinkled it around the camp. This powder could prevent most of the magical beasts and demonic plants from coming to the door. At the same time, it could also prevent snakes, insects, rats, and ants. After doing this, Luo Qingtong got into her tent. However, as soon as she got into the tent, she saw a figure sitting in her tent. Oh my God! The moment she saw this figure, Luo Qingtong's eyes widened and the corners of her mouth twitched violently. How could she have forgotten about this person? It's over, it's over. Luo Qingtong's face was full of grief. Chapter 25:15. Xiao Qi, you're back. Yu Xian's voice was gentle, but Luo Qingtong's lips twitched even more when she heard it. Cough, Yu Xian, why are you in my tent? As she asked, the villain in her heart was rolling on the ground and wailing. This was troublesome. How could she forget Yu Xian? If she had known that she would meet Yi Qianming, she would have sent Yu Xian away early. How was she going to explain to Yi Qianming that she had taken in a boy toy when she was pretending to be Luo Xiaoqi? Luo Qingtong's villain scratched the wall desperately. She could already imagine how angry Yi Qianming would be when he knew her identity in the future. Damn, fortunately, she had the foresight not to expose her identity to that man immediately. Otherwise, what would happen? It would definitely be a mess soon. However, she was forced to do it. She didn't want to take in a boy toy at all. Luo Qingtong had a headache, thinking about how to explain it to Yi Qianming in the future. Yu Mingxian looked at her and his eyes flashed slightly. He lowered his head and said softly, Xiao Qi, I'm here to sleep with you. You know, I can't bear to be with them. Xiao Qi, just think of it as helping me, okay? Yu Mingxian's eyes were strange, but his face was full of unspeakable fear and confusion. His words were full of helplessness, as if only Luo Qingtong could help him. In fact, this was the case. Yu Mingxian, who was now playing the role of Yu Xian, was a person who was once imprisoned as a boy toy. He was very dependent on Luo Qingtong who saved him. Except for her, no one else could get close to him, not to mention that because of his past trauma, he couldn't get close to any man at all. In the entire Red Flame mercenary group, except for Luo Qingtong, only Ouyang Yingyu could be close to him. But Ouyang Yingyu would become a different person at night, and he couldn't get close to her at all. Even the people in the Red Flame mercenary group couldn't get close to her. Therefore, no matter how he thought about it, Yu Mingxian could only share a tent with Luo Qingtong. This was also the reason why he was here. If she didn't know that Yi Qianming was the white jade masked man, perhaps Luo Qingtong wouldn't care that Yu Mingxian lived here. After all, it was normal for the mercenaries to sleep together when they were sleeping outside. But this was different. Damn, Yi Qianming was in this group. She was living with a boy toy, and the other party was obviously interested in her and admired her very much. Luo Qingtong trembled as she thought about it. She felt that if Yi Qianming found out about this, the consequences would be very, very serious. Most importantly, Luo Qingtong didn't want to hurt Yi Qianming's heart. That man valued her so much that she lived with another man right in front of him. Even if Luo Qingtong had never been in a relationship and had no experience in love, she would not do such a stupid thing. Putting herself in his shoes, even if she had no relationship with Yu Xian and only had the relationship of a savior, in Yi Qianming's eyes, it was different. Thinking about it, if she saw Yi Qianming living with a woman, even if the other party said that they had nothing to do with each other, would she tolerate it? Luo Qingtong couldn't accept it just thinking about it, let alone Yi Qianming. They both had the same pride and couldn't tolerate sand in their eyes. She couldn't tolerate it, so why should Yi Qianming tolerate it? But it was already late at night, it was too late to build another tent. And if they made too much noise, it would inevitably attract the magical beasts and plants that were active at night. Chapter 25:16. Aya. She was really stupid. If Yu Xian came to stay with her, she could have stayed with Yi Qianming. Speaking of which, Yu Xian also gave her a very good reason to get close to Yi Qianming. Why didn't she think of staying with him? Yi Qianxian and the others were her hired bodyguards. These bodyguards naturally included her safety at night. Luo Qingtong thought of this and her face instantly lit up with joy. She had already thought of what to do. Okay. She agreed readily. Yu Xian, you can stay here. It's okay. Luo Qingtong said and went out happily. Yu Mingxian looked at her back and was stunned. Then he frowned and asked, Little Seven, where are you going? Why was this a little different from what he thought? Since the other party allowed him to stay here, shouldn't she also stay here to rest? Yu Mingxian looked at the night outside. In this case, it was impossible to build another tent outside. Where was Luo Qingtong going? I naturally have a place to go. It's okay, you can have a good rest. Luo Qingtong's words were filled with joy. In the end, she didn't forget to comfort Yu Mingxian. Oh, by the way, you don't have to worry about staying here. I will let them guard here and not let anyone come in to disturb your rest. You also don't have to be afraid that someone will come in the middle of the night and scare you. Luo Qingtong said and immediately left happily. Only Yu Mingxian was left sitting in the same place, looking at her disappearing figure with a strange look. Yu Mingxian's face was ugly. This time, he came to Luo Qingtong's tent to have a chance to silently expose the other party's identity. In this way, he didn't need to alarm the white jade masked man. Secondly, he saw through Luo Qingtong's secret and he promised to keep it a secret for her. In this way, the other party would trust him very much and even rely on him. In this way, he could slowly and easily extract the information he wanted from her mouth. After all, in this world, what could bring the trust between two people better than having one of them keep a secret? This kind of spiritual closeness would definitely make the other party lower their guard against him. However, Luo Qingtong didn't even give him this opportunity. Yu Mingxian's eyes were cold. She raised her hand and grabbed the handle of the rattan chair she was sitting on. She almost lost control of her temper and shattered the rattan chair into pieces. At this time, Luo Qingtong hugged her bedding and ran to Yi Qianxian's tent. Just like her, Yi Qianxian had a tent to himself. Luo Qingtong stuck her head out and looked around. Yi Qianxian sat in the tent and seemed to feel something. He immediately looked in her direction and coldly shouted, "Who is it?" He raised his hand and prepared to send out a gust of wind. But at this time, Luo Qingtong walked in with a smile while hugging a bedding. "It's me. Brother." Luo Qingtong's last call was unusually loud. She ran in front of Yi Qianxian with a smile and put the bedding in her hands on the bed next to Yi Qianxian. Then she said to him with a smile, "How is it? Are you surprised to see me?" Yi Qianxian didn't look at her. He just stared at the bedding she put on his bed and coldly said, "What do you mean by this? What do you mean?" Chapter 25:17. She blinked her eyes and looked at Yi Qianxian with an expression that said, "Why are you so strange?" She said, "Of course I'm sleeping here. Don't tell me you've forgotten our previous agreement." "What agreement do we have?" Yi Qianxian looked at the self-righteous young man in front of him and felt the blue veins on his forehead throbbing violently. Not only was this Luo Xiaoqi's ability and name very similar to Luo Qingtong's, but even her unreasonable personality was also very similar to Luo Qingtong's. Everything she did was unexpected. It was impossible to figure out. Yi Qianren didn't expect that she would bring a blanket over and want to sleep with her. She even said that it was an agreement between her and him. Why didn't he know that he had such an agreement with her before? Did he have amnesia at such a young age? His heavenly pulse body had a problem with his meridians, not his brain. Yi Qianxian was about to throw Luo Qingtong's quilt away with a poker face, but Luo Qingtong held him down. She pressed her whole body on the quilt and said to Yi Qianxian pitifully, "Brother, please take pity on me. My tent has been slept in by someone else. If you kick me out, I can only sleep outside in the wilderness. Are you willing to do that?" Luo Qingtong swallowed the words that were about to come out of her mouth. She looked at Yi Qianxian with a pitiful face and said, "Brother, don't forget that you promised to protect me. What if I sleep outside and something happens to me? You can't just take advantage of me and not admit it." Since he took her protection fee, he was her man. Of course, he was her man even if he didn't take her. But didn't she need a legitimate reason now? Yi Qianxian looked at the shameless young man in front of him and the blue veins on his forehead throbbed even more violently. "Who is sleeping in your tent?" His voice was cold. The Red Flame mercenary group cherished Luo Xiaoqi very much, so they built a tent for her alone. No one would snatch it from her, not to mention the other mercenary groups and Chu Xiaofeng. Yi Qianxian didn't quite believe Luo Qingtong's words. The other party was as cunning as that woman. Yi Qianxian did not want to get close to him at all. He had already been influenced enough by the other party, and he didn't want to continue like this. Ahem. Yu Xian, pet boy that I saved. Luo Qingtong thought that since she was going to die sooner or later, she might as well confess as soon as possible. This way, when her identity was exposed and this man asked her again, she could use the fact that she had already confessed to him. Aya, she really is a genius. This was simply perfect. As for Yi Qianxian, after hearing her words, his hands suddenly tightened and he grabbed her arm. "Pet boy?" His eyes narrowed slightly, and the anger within them seemed to be about to pounce out from behind the white jade mask. "You even brought a pet boy here. You really know how to enjoy life." Yi Qianxian's voice was cold and filled with anger. He didn't know where this anger came from, but it couldn't be extinguished no matter how hard he tried. "In that case, why are you still here? Get out of here," he said and was about to throw Luo Qingtong out. Chapter 25:18. That's not my boy toy. It's me who saved him. Damn, didn't this man listen to the main point when he was angry? Luo Qingtong was glad that it was Luo Xiaoqi who was facing him. If it was Luo Qingtong, she would really be in big trouble. She wouldn't be able to clear her name even if she jumped into the Yellow River. He was frightened and couldn't stay with those mercenaries, so he went to my tent. "Brother, please take me in." Luo Qingtong hugged Yi Qianming's waist so tightly that he couldn't pull her away. Yi Qianming's eyes were cold. It took him a lot of effort to suppress the force that wanted to push her away subconsciously. He put his hand on Luo Qingtong's body, but for some reason, he just couldn't do it. Otherwise, Luo Qingtong's action of hugging him was enough to be shocked to death by the defensive force in his body. Not to mention being able to entangle him so tightly. Let go. His voice was cold and he squeezed out 2 words from between his teeth. No. What a joke, she would be thrown out as soon as she let go. Luo Qingtong made up her mind not to go back to her tent. If she didn't stay with Yi Qianming, she could only sleep in the wilderness. She wouldn't do it even if she was beaten to death. Brother, look at how talented you are. You have both integrity and talent, and your martial arts are excellent. You definitely won't let a weak young man like me live in the open without anyone to depend on, right? What's more, I gave you so many spiritual flowers and spiritual herbs today. Since you took the money, you have to guarantee my safety. As a protector, you have to be competent. Brother, you are a man of your words. You will never break your promise, right? Luo Qingtong's words were endless. The blue veins on Yi Qianming's forehead kept throbbing and he raised his hand to pull her hand. If one hand couldn't do it, then 2. Seeing that she was about to be pulled away from Yi Qianxian and thrown out, Luo Qingtong hurriedly shouted. All right. I'm not sleeping in the same bed as you. I'll sleep on the floor, right? If I continue to reject you, I will be unreasonable and inhumane. Luo Qingtong seriously considered if Yi Qianxian really didn't agree, should she try to make a scene or something? In any case, her image was like floating clouds to her. Being able to stay at Yi Qianxian's place was the most important thing. Outside, Bei Qing, Feng Yu, and the others rushed over when they heard the commotion coming from their master's tent. However, looking at the scene in front of them, they didn't know whether they should go up to help or not. What was going on between Luo Shaoqi and his master? They looked at Luo Qingtong desperately clinging to Yi Qianxian like a koala bear. And her master was holding back her temper and pulling her away. It had been a long time since her master was so easy to talk to. Bei Qing and Feng Yu looked at Yi Qianxian at this moment and inexplicably felt like time had turned back. They saw the Yi Qianxian who was always angered by Luo Qingtong but was reluctant to do anything to her. The evil doctor really had a great influence on their master. Even for such a young man, their master could hold back his temper and not directly throw him out with serious injuries. Cough, Feng Yu looked at the 2 people in front of her and coughed softly. Master Luo Shaoqi, if you have nowhere to go, you can come to our tent for the night. Their tent was not as crowded as the other mercenary groups. It was a piece of cake to make room for Luo Qingtong. Chapter 25:19. No. I won't go. Their voices sounded almost at the same time. In an instant, Bei Qing and Feng Yu were dumbfounded. They looked at their master and then at Luo Qingtong, not knowing what to say. It was okay if Luo Shaoqi didn't go. After all, their master had such a spacious place. If she didn't live with their master, it would be stupid of her to share a tent with them. But what was wrong with their master? Didn't he hate Luo Shaoqi? Was he going to throw her out? Why did he change his mind? Feng Yu spoke up to help her master out of this predicament. But how was her master going to tear down her stage awe? Yi Qianxian regretted it as soon as he spoke. He didn't know what was wrong with him. He didn't want to care about Luo Shaoqi and didn't want her to live in his tent. But when he thought that she would go to Bei Qing and Feng Yu's tent, sleep on the same bed with them, and even have sex with them in the middle of the night, his face turned livid. Before he could come back to his senses, he had already roared out the word no. Damn it. Yi Qianxian's face turned ugly, but Luo Qingtong jumped up with joy. Haha. You said yes. Did you hear that? Your master said yes. Hurry up. Go and make a wooden bed for me. Luo Qingtong's face was full of joy. For Bei Qing and Feng Yu, it was very easy to make a rattan chair and a wooden bed with local materials. It didn't take much effort. But their master, they looked at their master. Yi Qianxian's face hidden behind the white jade mask was tense, and his thin lips were almost pressed into a line. However, he couldn't let Yi Qianren go back on her words. He couldn't do it. What's more, this young man and Luo Qingtong were very similar to each other. He wouldn't give him a chance to change his mind. Thinking of this, Yi Qianxian's blue veins on his forehead jumped violently. Then he said coldly, "What bed do you want? Don't you want to sleep on the floor?" As soon as he said this, he regretted it. Damn it, didn't this mean that he allowed her to live here? Even though he wasn't completely certain, his words sounded like they were already set in stone. As expected, Luo Qingtong did not look angry at all when she heard what he said. Instead, she smiled and nodded hurriedly. Sure. I'll sleep on the floor." Luo Qingtong's smile was very treacherous. She deliberately asked Feng Yu to make a wooden bed, so that she could force Yi Qianxian to say what he just said. This time, his wish came true. Happy. Smiling, she moved her mattress off Yi Qianxian's bed and made a mattress on the floor next to his bed. Her movements were so fast, in the blink of an eye, she had made a mattress on the floor. Yi Qianxian looked at her, and the blue veins on his forehead jumped again. He said coldly, "Sleep over there." He raised his hand and pointed at the entrance of the tent. That place was the furthest away from Yi Qianxian's bed. Luo Qingtong looked and shook her head decisively, "No. It's so far away. How can you protect me? It's safer here." Chapter 25-20. You. Yi Qianxian was so angry that he almost laughed. Did she have the right to bargain with him? He raised his hand and was about to carry Luo Qingtong over. But inexplicably, when he saw Luo Qingtong wrapped in a cocoon, he thought of the tricks that Luo Qingtong played with him in bed. At that time, that woman was also wrapped in the quilt like a silkworm and refused to come out. She looked cunning and cute, full of all kinds of spiritual aura. She was not as fierce and domineering as she was outside at all. When that woman was cold, she was like Azura, cruel and heartless. When she was gentle, she was like a cunning fox, a mysterious woman in the world. Beautiful, arrogant, wild, cunning and wanton, she was all because of her. Yi Qianxian's hand stopped in the air. He didn't throw Luo Xiaoqi over. The scene of her being wrapped in a cocoon touched his heartstrings, so he didn't continue to move. "Well, you can go first." Taking a deep breath, Yi Qianxian decided not to argue with Luo Xiaoqi. It was just one night. If she wanted to sleep with him, he would sleep with her. His voice was cold. Bei Qing and Feng Yu left as ordered. They were just a little surprised by Yi Qianxian's indulgence of Luo Xiaoqi. But Luo Qingtong was so similar to the evil doctor. It was true that Master sometimes couldn't do anything to her. Alas, they just hoped that they could find the evil doctor as soon as possible. With that thought in mind, they immediately left. After they left, Yi Qianxian went straight to his bed. Because Luo Qingtong occupied the empty space in front of his bed, he had to go around to the end of the bed to get on the bed. Not wanting to be entangled with Luo Qingtong anymore, Yi Qianxian directly lay on the bed and turned off the light. In an instant, the tent was dark. Luo Qingtong moved in the cocoon and then slowly showed her head. She looked at Yi Qianren lying on her side with her back facing her and a smile appeared on her face. This man didn't bring her to the door. Luo Qingtong just thought that Yi Qianxian would throw her to him. She didn't expect that he acquiesced to her sleeping here. Sure enough, he had a special feeling for her. Luo Qingtong had been thinking very clearly recently. From the first time Yi Qianren tried to find out his identity, to every time she interacted with him. This man was both impatient and didn't hurt her. Obviously, even if she had changed her appearance and gender after she took the small illusion elixir, the man still recognized her. But this recognition was just a feeling. Also, because she had turned into a man, he felt that his recognition was an illusion. But even so, Yi Qianxian subconsciously didn't want to hurt her. Otherwise, based on the fact that she had offended Yi Qianren time and time again, if it was someone else, they would have been dealt with badly by Yi Qianren. There was absolutely no chance for her to get close to him. But at this moment, this man retreated step by step as she approached him again and again. Luo Qingtong's heart was filled with sweetness. She looked at Yi Qianxian's back, which seemed to be asleep but was actually tense. She chuckled and then fell asleep peacefully. That's right, she fell asleep. Luo Qingtong didn't just want to sleep here for one night. She wanted to sleep here every night in the future. So this night, she wouldn't do anything. And because Yi Qianxian was sleeping not far from her, she slept very soundly. Chapter 25-21. And on the bed beside her, Yi Qianxian also woke up with a terrible expression. He actually fell asleep last night. Yi Qianxian couldn't believe it himself. He had always hated being approached by others, let alone sleeping in the same room with others. He thought he would be sleepless last night. But inexplicably, he fell asleep. He didn't even know when he fell asleep. Luo Shaoqi was just lying on the bed not far away from him. When did he start to be so unguarded towards people? Yi Qianxian gritted his teeth, his expression very bad. But Luo Qingtong was completely unaware. She slept very well last night. After coming to the outer realm for so long, she slept the most deeply and soundly this time. At other times, she maintained the habit of sleeping lightly. Only by Yi Qianxian's side would she let herself relax. This was also one of the habits that the man had made her develop for so long. Except for Yi Qianxian's side, Luo Qingtong couldn't completely relax anywhere else. In this world, she was only willing to rely on Yi Qianxian. In front of him, she let down all her defenses and let him see her weakness and softness. No one else could. Good morning, brother. Luo Qingtong yawned and greeted Yi Qianxian with a smile. She had spent a lot of effort to suppress the two words, Qianren, and she had almost revealed a flaw. Yi Qianxian ignored her with a cold face. He only got up and washed up before walking out. Luo Qingtong didn't care. She had seen the man's sullen face many times. It was harmless. She wasn't afraid. She stretched lazily and got up to wash up. By the time she finished washing up and walked out, the noise outside was getting louder and louder. It was mixed with a woman's sharp voice. Luo Qingtong frowned and suddenly felt that the voice was a bit familiar. She walked out of the camp. At this time, outside the camp of Luo Qingtong and the others, a group of people were arguing with Chu Xiaofeng and the others. Chu Xiaofeng, don't go too far. I've already apologized to you. What more do you want? We're already in such a sorry state, yet you're still unwilling to accept us. Could it be that you want to watch us die in the abandoned continent? Don't forget that the clan has said that we can't leave them to die. If you do this, I won't let you off easily when I return to the family. Outside the campsite, Chu Ku, Chu Yufei, and the others were currently standing behind Chu Xiaofeng and the others with disheveled expressions. Their current appearance could be said to be extremely miserable. Not only were Chu Ku and Chu Yufei's gorgeous makeup smudged, but their clothes were also tattered. Even the mercenary groups behind them suffered heavy losses. This was especially true for Chu Yufei. The mercenary groups behind her, especially the high-ranking mercenary groups, had almost all of their members left. The middle-ranking mercenary groups had also suffered heavy losses. On the contrary, the low-ranking mercenary groups behind Chu Ku had most of their members left. At this time, Chu Ku had her hands on her hips and was scolding Chu Xiaofeng arrogantly. Luo Qingtong frowned and asked a mercenary next to her, "What's going on? Little seventh young master?" Seeing that it was Luo Qingtong, the mercenary who was questioned had a very respectful expression. He looked at Chu Ku opposite him and said with an angry and relieved expression, "It's all because of this woman." Chapter 25-22. It turned out that Chu Ku, and the others were here to seek refuge with Chu Xiaofeng. Coincidentally, Chu Ku, and the others found Luo Qingtong's camp in the wee hours of the morning and ran over to ask Chu Xiaofeng to take them in. At this moment, both sides were arguing. Chu Xiaofeng didn't want to take Chu Ku, and the others in. What a joke. If it was someone from the Tianfeng Chu family, it would make sense. But Chu Ku and the others, forget it. Chu Ku, and the others had obviously just been attacked and were still in shock. Moreover, they had no one to rely on other than Chu Xiaofeng. Who knew when they would find another disciple from the Tianfeng Chu family? Did they have a grudge against them? Moreover, with their current strength, they wouldn't be able to casually walk around the abandoned continent anymore. It would be strange if they were not eaten by those magical beasts and demonic plants. Therefore, even if Chu Ku, was extremely unwilling, she was still pushed out by Chu Yufei to apologize to Chu Xiaofeng and seek protection. However, her personality was arrogant and domineering. She had never put Chu Xiaofeng in her eyes. Previously, because of Luo Qingtong, the third elder's line was targeted by the eighth elder's line. The wound on her face was still swollen. Therefore, her apology was insincere. Seeing that Chu Xiaofeng was unwilling to accept them, she immediately made a big fuss. This was the voice that Luo Qingtong heard and woke her up. As the mercenary spoke, he said angrily, "Little seventh young master, you don't know." They wouldn't have fallen to such a state. It was Chu Ku who didn't listen to advice. Those mercenaries had already seen the danger and told her and Chu Yufei to leave quickly. But she didn't care and said it was nothing. In the end, she angered those magical beasts and demonic plants. In the end, the team was almost wiped out. She and Chu Yufei can run fast, but those mercenaries, you see, the mercenary's eyes turned red as he spoke. He was angry and glad. Fortunately, they followed Chu Xiaofeng and Luo Qingtong. Otherwise, who knew what would happen if he were to be with the other children of the Tianfeng Chu clan? If he was lucky, he might meet a good master and nothing would happen. But he also felt that it would not be as relaxed as now with Luo Qingtong and the others. If one was unlucky and met someone like Chu Ku, it would be a disaster. When the mercenary's voice rang out, on the other side, Chu Ku, and the other mercenaries saw Luo Qingtong and became even more excited. Little seventh young master, we are willing to follow you. Please tell young Master Feng to let us go with you. The mercenaries couldn't stand Chu Ku anymore. If they continued to hang out with him, they would be finished sooner or later. Chu Yufei was with Chu Ku, so they couldn't follow her. Everyone's voices rang out one after another, and Chu Ku, was so angry that her mouth almost went crooked. She hated Luo Qingtong the most. If it wasn't for him, how could she have fallen to such a state? If it wasn't for the other party, they would have been snatched away by her to be her guards. Even those people with white jade masks were the same. Chu Ku, looked at Yi Qianming and the others who were standing not far from Luo Qingtong. The latter and the others were tall and slender. In this abandoned continent, they didn't look like they were here to train as guards. Instead, they looked like they were here for a leisurely outing. Chapter 25-23. She didn't know if it was because of a woman's intuition. Chu Ku paid special attention to Yi Qianming and the others. Especially Yi Qianming, she was certain that the other party was very powerful. And Chu Yufei beside her was also the same. Looking at Yi Qianming, who was wearing a white jade mask, her heart was both happy and resentful. She was happy to meet the other party again. She was resentful because Chu Ku had put her in such a difficult situation and made a fool of herself. However, Chu Yufei was also very eager to stay. Unlike Chu Ku, who only saw Chu Xiaofeng and the others, Chu Yufei observed more carefully. She found that Chu Xiaofeng and the others were not only living well, but also very well. They were proud of their success. Even Luo Xiaoqi, who was the weakest, had no injuries on her body, let alone the others. although Chu Xiaofeng and the others were stronger. But in Mercenary City, the strength of the mercenary corps was almost the same. Why were they able to live so well, while they were in such a difficult situation? Obviously, there were masters among them. And they were very strong masters. Chu Yufei thought, and her eyes were fixed on Yi Qianming. This group of people with white jade masks had extraordinary temperaments. It must be because of them that Chu Xiaofeng and the others were safe. It was ridiculous that these mercenaries thought it was Luo Xiaoqi. Chu Yufei was jealous. She stared at Yi Qianming without blinking, thinking about how to use her charm to seduce the other party. Of course, all of this had to be done by letting them join Chu Xiaofeng's team first. Thinking of this, she suddenly pressed Chu Ku and said softly to Chu Xiaofeng, "Brother Xiaofeng, we are all of the same clan. Sister Ku and you only had a small conflict before. Are you really going to watch us be helpless on the abandoned continent?" What's more, as she spoke, she lowered her eyes slightly, and a deep light flashed in her eyes. However, she still spoke with sincerity. "The entire Heavenly Wind Shu clan knows about the grudge between you and little sister Ku. If something really happens to us on the abandoned continent, even if you are not suspected, I think Brother Xiaofeng's life will not be very good, right? It will also be difficult for the 8th Elder's family to get away. And my mother and the Patriarch. If they target you, I'm afraid you and the 8th Elder's family won't be able to bear it." As soon as she said this, Luo Qingtong's eyes raised. This Chu Yufei's mind. It looked like they were asking Chu Xiaofeng to take them in, but in fact, there was a needle hidden in the silk floss, forcing Chu Xiaofeng to take them in. It was also a threat. Her words was much more than Chu Ku-er's. Chu Xiaofeng might not care of Chu Ku-er's words. But what Chu Yufei said, he would consider it seriously. After all, the things she pointed out were things that Chu Xiaofeng valued very much. That was indeed the case. The moment Chu Yufei said that, Chu Xiaofeng's heart trembled. TTTSTS family TSSSSSS. Moreover, there was also Chu Yufei. Thinking of Madame Xing behind her and her saving the Patriarch's life, Chu Xiaofeng frowned. He really didn't want to take Chu Ku and Chu Yufei in. But now, Chu Yufei's words had reached such a point. He couldn't disagree. But what about Luo Xiaoqi? Chu Xiaofeng looked at Luo Qingtong and was about to ask her opinion. Chapter 25-24. What you encountered earlier was an attack from the 1,000 silkworms. Luo Qingtong looked at the sorry state of Chu Ku and the others. She had only roughly glanced at the injuries on Chu Ku and the others and did not look at them in detail. Now that she saw some strange injuries on them, she immediately raised her eyebrows. It was fine for those who were lightly injured. But those who were seriously injured, Luo Qingtong looked at the marks on their bodies. They were clearly the marks of silk threads. And these marks were abnormally firm and flexible. The marks made by the silk threads were almost bone deep, as if they had been cut by a sharp knife. Looking at the small amount of mucus on their bodies, Luo Qingtong guessed that Chu Ku and the others had encountered a danger that was enough to wipe out the whole team. The moment she said this, Chu Ku and the others' gazes froze. Especially Chu Yufei, who looked at Luo Qingtong with vigilance and wariness. She did not know why, but after Luo Qingtong framed the 3rd Elder's family last time, she was somewhat afraid of this young man. Previously, if Luo Qingtong had not expressed her attitude, Chu Yufei would not have dared to negotiate with Chu Xiaofeng. She had already thought about it. If Luo Qingtong insisted on not letting Chu Ku join the team, then she would hypocritically persuade her and then, helplessly, join Chu Xiaofeng's team. In this way, she could get rid of Chu Ku without any effort. In fact, if it were not for the fact that she wanted to maintain her gentle and generous character, Chu Yufei would not have cared about Chu Ku's life. After all, she could join Chu Xiaofeng's team alone. The one who had a grudge against the 8th Elder's family was Chu Ku not her. For the sake of the family head and her mother, Chu Xiaofeng would take her in. But she had to take into account their sisterhood, and could not abandon Chu Ku, in front of everyone. If Luo Qingtong were to make things difficult for her, it would be exactly what she wanted. However, who would have thought that Luo Qingtong would ignore their request to join the team? Instead, she asked them if the attack they suffered came from the 1,000 silkworms. 1,000 silkworms? What was that? Chu Yufei's mind spun quickly. She realized that the magical beasts that attacked them were indeed spitting out threads as thin as thousands of strands. Those threads were extremely tough. They could not be cut by a blade or burned by fire. They were everywhere in the air, making it impossible for the naked eye to recognize them. That was why the mercenaries around her had suffered such heavy losses. In fact, this could have been avoided. The mercenaries around her had already told her that there might be danger ahead and asked her to stop Chu Ku, stubbornness. However, she didn't think much of it. There was a wide expanse in front of her, so what danger could there be? She smiled and agreed. She had no way of stopping Chu Ku, But in reality, she didn't tell Chu Ku, at all. Otherwise, this wouldn't have happened. However, Chu Yufei would not let anyone know about this. She would only push the blame to Chu Ku, and make everyone hate her. That would make her seem exceptionally innocent and magnanimous. Now that she heard Luo Qingtong ask about the 1,000 silkworms, her heart suddenly jumped. She looked at the young man, not knowing if she had seen through something. Why do you ask, seventh young master? The magical beasts that attacked us did indeed spit out threads. Chapter 25-25. Even if she denied it now, the mercenaries behind her would tell Luo Qingtong the truth. She might as well say it herself and see what Luo Qingtong wanted to do. Could it be that there was something mysterious about the 1,000 silkworms? It was said that Luo Xiaoqi's eyes were extremely sharp. But no matter how sharp she was, it was impossible for her to see the situation at that time from the injuries on these people, right? Besides, even if she saw it, so what? At that time, she was just careless. The one who really caused the big trouble was Chu Ku, When the time came, she would cry pitifully and repent. Could it be that others were not allowed to make mistakes? Chu Yufei thought about it and realized that even if Luo Qingtong pointed out the situation at that time, she would not be afraid of anything. Suddenly, she was not so nervous. She looked at Luo Qingtong, wanting to see what she wanted to do. Luo Qingtong's gaze swept past her with a faint smile. This Chu Yufei was so good at scheming and was extraordinary. She didn't believe that she couldn't stop Chu Ku, stubbornness when she knew that she was in danger. The reason why this group of mercenaries ended up like this was not only because Chu Ku, acted recklessly, but also because Chu Yufei tacitly allowed it. It was just that Chu Ku, was the only one who took the blame. These two people, one was a white lotus, and the other was a green tea bitch. They were brainless and did not even know that they were being played in circles. Luo Qingtong was happy to watch the show. Why did she have to point it out? What did it have to do with her? The reason why she asked about the 1,000 silkworms was that she remembered that the 1,000 silkworms were called meridian replenishing worms. The silk threads in their bodies were the most powerful killing weapon when spat out, but when collected, they were the best meridian replenishing worms. If someone's meridians were broken and they became a cripple, they only needed to channel these silk threads into the other party's body and reconstruct their meridians. These silk threads could replace the real meridians and allow the other party to gather strength and exert strength that they could no longer exert. For example, the former Grand Supreme Dean was affected by the power of the divine beast flowing light in the land of the deceased immortals. His meridians were blocked and his strength plummeted. He had strength but could not use it. In fact, his strength was even regressing. However, with the 1,000 silkworms threads, even if Luo Qingtong's strength at that time was not enough to expel the power from his body, she could use these threads to rearrange the meridians in his body. This would allow his strength to flow through the meridians that she had set up and not have to pass through his original meridians to block the path. In this way, the Supreme Dean's strength would not be restricted. Even if Luo Qingtong could not heal his injuries, his strength would not be affected in the slightest. However, this was not the only benefit of the 1,000 silkworms. It was said that once the 1,000 silkworms gathered into a group, the insect king's body would produce an insect treasure. This insect treasure had the ability to regenerate indefinitely. To put it simply, the silk threads of the 1,000 silkworms were consumables. Once it exceeded the limit of what it could withstand, it might break, and a new one would have to be replaced. However, the threads in this insect treasure could be regenerated after being broken. The 1,000 filaments worm was an unremarkable existence in the outer realm. Although their function was special, no one paid special attention to them. After all, for things like reconnecting broken meridians, other than Luo Qingtong, who had a pair of bloody eyes that could see through the human body and accurately fit every meridian without the slightest error, there was no one else. Chapter 25-26. Translations. Therefore, no one paid much attention to the 1,000 filaments worm, even though it was known as the meridian replenishing worm. Not to mention that they were extremely rare and hard to find. Therefore, Chu Yufei and the others were stunned when they heard Luo Qingtong mention the 1,000 filaments worm. They did not know what it was. On the contrary, Bei Qing and Feng Yu's eyes lit up. 1,000 filaments worm, meridian replenishing worm? They had wanted to find the meridian replenishing worm so that Luo Qingtong could replenish Yi Qianxian's meridians. In this way, Yi Qianxian would be able to use his new meridians to exert his strength. Although his strength would still be limited, in this way, even if his meridians were to be broken, he would not hurt himself. This was a great protection for Yi Qianxian's meridians. In this way, his lifespan might be extended and increased to a certain extent. Luo Qingtong also had the same idea. She did not care how long the people with the heavenly meridian's body had lived, but her man must live a long life. No one could snatch him away from her. These 1,000 filaments worms came at the right time. Take us to the place where you encountered those magical beasts, and I will let you join the team. Luo Qingtong did not waste any time and directly said to Chu Yufei and the others. Before the latter could speak, Chu Ku's sharp voice sounded. Who do you think you are? How dare you make decisions? Chu Xiaofeng, are these the mercenaries in your team? Overstepping your master's authority and making decisions without permission? You are really good at enduring. Chu Ku looked at Luo Qingtong angrily. The person she hated the most was definitely not Chu Xiaofeng, but Luo Qingtong. This Luo Xiaoqi had caused the people of the Third Elder's team to be so miserable. This was especially true for her, who had directly fallen from her status as a proud daughter of heaven. Chu Ku looked at Luo Qingtong with extreme hatred. Luo Qingtong did not even bother to look at her. Did she need to pay attention to a brainless woman? When Chu Ku's voice sounded, Chu Xiaofeng's unhappy voice sounded. Chu Ku, if you don't want to die, then shut your mouth. What's wrong with her? She's the one who can make the decision. Who do you think you are? How dare you order the people in my team? If you dare to say another word, then you will die. During this period of time, Chu Xiaofeng had observed Luo Qingtong's behavior and treated her like a god of wealth. Everyone in this team, Chu Xiaofeng. In the end, Chu Ku was blind and wanted others to be blind with her. Luo Qingtong's a thing. She a mention, she herself a lot, Chu Xiaofeng's a lot more. As attention to mention to attention to Luo to Chu to team. Now that Luo Qingtong had spoken, Chu Ku came out to court death. If she wanted to die, he would fulfill her wish. Chu Xiaofeng's eyes were mocking and cold. Chu Ku was stung by his words and almost went crazy. She was the third miss of the Tianfeng Chu family. Although she was no longer a direct descendant, she was not someone a small mercenary from Tianfeng City could compare to. Chu Xiaofeng actually mocked her for such a *tch. You! She screamed and was about to rush forward, but Chu Yufei held her back. Chu Yufei really wanted to strangle Chu Ku to death. Chapter 25-27. Chu Xiaofeng didn't want to accept them into the team. She tried her best to persuade him, but he finally showed signs of wavering. Now, Luo Shaoqi also said that they could enter. But now, she was courting death. If he were to lose this only chance, could it be that he would have to fend for himself with her in this abandoned continent? Idiot. She was really stupid. He was just a teenager. He had some prestige among the mercenaries in Tianfeng Mercenary City with his little ability. After they entered the team, they could deal with him however they wanted. Why did she have to make trouble at this juncture? Chu Yufei was furious, but she couldn't ignore Chu Ku. Otherwise, how could she act as a gentle, generous, kind, and innocent girl? She had no choice but to clench her teeth and persuade Chu Ku. However, a murderous aura flashed through his heart one after another. If she had known that Chu Ku was such a burden, she would have killed her on the way, so that she wouldn't drag her down. What an idiot. After she finished scolding and comforting Chu Ku, she looked at Luo Qingtong and said with a smile, "Young Master Shaoqi, I'm sorry. Sister Ku is used to being arrogant since she was young. Naturally, she makes mistakes easily. She didn't mean it. Please don't be calculative with her. I'll take you to the place where the 1,000 silkworms are. Please take us with you." The mercenaries behind her couldn't wait. Even if they insisted on not saying where the 1,000 silkworms were, these mercenaries would rush to say it. At that time, they would be harmed. Without Luo Shaoqi's promise, they would definitely not be able to enter the team after offending her. At that time, who would care about their lives? Only an idiot like Chu Ku would offend Luo Shaoqi at this time. Therefore, when Chu Yufei spoke, she didn't mention any conditions. Not only that, but she also told them all the methods of the 1,000 silkworms. Through the eyes of the mercenaries behind her, Luo Qingtong knew that she wasn't lying. Interesting. This Chu Yufei was really smart. But smart women were the easiest to be fooled by their cleverness. She'd better not use her cleverness on herself. Otherwise, Luo Qingtong wouldn't mind tearing her face apart in front of others. Anyway, she was best at slapping people in the face. After receiving the information from Chu Yufei, Luo Qingtong turned to Chu Xiaofeng and said, "Young Master Feng, do me a favor. I want those 1,000 silkworms. They belong to me. If those 1,000 silkworms are guarding the spiritual flowers and spiritual herbs, how about they belong to you?" According to Chu Yufei and the others' descriptions, the 1,000 silkworms they encountered were a large group of over 100. Usually, the 1,000 silkworms would appear alone or in small groups. For such a large group with more than 100 of them, the spiritual flowers and spiritual herbs they were guarding must be very precious or in large quantities. Under such circumstances, Chu Xiaofeng naturally agreed readily. The other mercenary groups also had no objections. Even the mercenaries behind Chu Ku and Chu Yufei were promised rewards by Luo Qingtong. The 1,000 silkworms were too rare. In contrast, she didn't care about those spiritual flowers and spiritual herbs. Moreover, if the 1,000 silkworms gathered in a group and gave birth to a king worm, there might already be a bug treasure in the king worm's stomach. She was very happy at the thought of being able to forge meridians for Yi Qianxian that wouldn't break. Chapter 25-28. While Luo Qingtong and Chu Xiaofeng were talking, Bei Qing, Feng Yu, and the others glanced at their master and came up. They coughed softly and said, "Young Master Shaoqi." They followed the way the mercenaries addressed Luo Shaoqi. Firstly, it showed their closeness. Secondly, it was because the other party was similar to Luo Qingtong, so they unconsciously addressed him respectfully. They felt that this young man named Luo Shaoqi was not an ordinary person. Ahem. Feng Yu said, "Young Master Shaoqi, I wonder if you can give us some of the 1,000 silkworms?" They were discussing with Luo Qingtong, but they were very embarrassed. Because they also knew that it was a bit difficult. After all, Luo Qingtong was the one who wanted these 1,000 silkworms first. It was really wishful thinking for them to want other people's things just by saying hello. In fact, if the person who wanted the 1,000 silkworms was not Luo Qingtong, they would not be so easy to talk to. With their strength, they could just snatch the 1,000 silkworms when they wanted them. Anyway, these things did not belong to Luo Qingtong yet, so they would rely on their own abilities. But in this way, they would have a falling out with Luo Qingtong. If it were someone else, they would have a falling out. They would just leave the team directly. But this person was Luo Shaoqi. They thought that the other party gave them a similar feeling to the evil doctor, and then they thought of their master's special treatment and indulgence of the other party. They always felt that there was an inexplicable attitude of loving the house and its crow. If they hurt Luo Shaoqi because of this, not to mention others, even their master would be furious. At that time, they would all be in trouble. Therefore, they had no choice but to discuss with Luo Qingtong. They did not dare to have the slightest idea of snatching the 1,000 silkworms. And Luo Qingtong naturally knew what they were thinking. Looking at the man beside her who was looking straight ahead, but his body was very tense and waiting for her answer, Luo Qingtong smiled and nodded, of course. Anyway, this thing was for him. Luo Qingtong was not surprised by Bei Qing and Feng Yu's actions. In fact, if Yi Qianxian wasn't willing to make a move on her, they could have taken her by force. This man, no matter what the situation was unwilling to hurt her. Even if the 1,000 silkworms threads were extremely important to him. When Yi Qianxian heard Luo Qingtong's reply, he heaved a sigh of relief. If he could, he naturally didn't want to hurt him. However, the 1,000 silkworms threads were extremely important to him. That woman had always wanted to heal his meridians. If she could see these things, she would definitely be very happy. Moreover, his meridians were fine, which made her less worried. More importantly, he would have fewer misgivings when he attacked in the future. He would no longer need to calculate his strength before attacking. The slightest excess would result in the collapse of his meridians. Didn't those people in Tiandu rely on this to unscrupulously search for his whereabouts? Otherwise, according to his previous strength, would these people dare to appear in front of him? No matter how many came, he would be killed. He could overturn the whole Tiandu. How could he allow them to control his own life? Thinking of the good idea of the emperor of Tiandu, Yi Qianxian snorted coldly, and his eyes reflected a cold light. Chapter 25-29. In the past, he was too lazy to care about them, but that didn't mean that his attitude was still the same now. If those people dared to stop him from being with that woman, then they should be prepared to suffer his wrath. Yi Qianming's eyes flashed with a bloody light. Deep, bloodthirsty, and dark. Luo Qingtong and the others were ready to set off. The place where Chu Ku and the others were attacked was not far from here. Otherwise, they wouldn't have been able to find Chu Xiaofeng and the others with their current strength. Of course, this was also due to the fact that Chu Xiaofeng and the others were too crazy yesterday and killed too many magical beasts and demon plants. Otherwise, Chu Ku and the others might not have been able to find their camp alive. They might have been swallowed by magical beasts and demon plants halfway. Luo Qingtong and the others followed them to the place where the 1,000 silkworms were. It was a huge call with many lush trees and grass growing inside. In the middle of this huge call, there was a flat open space. It was right in the middle of the call and was surrounded by trees all around. It's there. Chu Yufei saw the open space and her face turned pale. She pitifully approached Yi Qianming and the others and then said weakly, "We were attacked when we were walking. A group of 1,000 silkworms surrounded us and we couldn't escape even if we wanted to." If it weren't for, when she said this, her eyes were already filled with tears and her body was on the verge of collapsing. However, before she could lean on Yi Qianming, the latter had already taken a step forward and appeared beside Luo Qingtong. "Did you see anything?" Yi Qianming's voice was deep and there was anger and impatience hidden in it. However, this anger wasn't directed at Luo Qingtong, but at Chu Yufei, who wanted to fall on him. Did she think that she could hide from him with her little tricks? If it weren't for the fact that this wasn't the right time to teach her a lesson, Yi Qianming would have already flung her away with his sleeves. Was he someone that anyone could fall on him just because they wanted to? Wasn't she afraid of dying without a burial place? Yi Qianming's protective power was extremely strong. Someone like Chu Yufei was easily killed by it. It was really said that the ignorant were fearless. Luo Qingtong couldn't help but laugh when she heard the anger in his voice. She glanced at Chu Yufei. Before the latter could even fall, the target had already escaped. As for Bei Qing, Feng Yu, and the others, it was as if they had discussed this beforehand. They all took a step back, completely distancing themselves from Chu Yufei. They didn't want to bring a burden with them when they made their move later. These 1,000 silkworms were of great significance to master. Their importance might be even higher than the sky luo grass. They could not afford to lose them. They had to keep an eye on the surroundings to prevent any 1,000 silkworms from escaping. How could they have the time to deal with Chu Yufei? The latter originally wanted to stay in Yi Qianming's arms and let him protect her. That way, she wouldn't be in danger. She could even get close to him and use her charm to confuse him. Who would have thought that Yi Qianming would run away without even looking at her? As for Bei Qing, Feng Yu, and the others, they avoided her like she was a snake or scorpion. Chu Yufei gritted her teeth. Her body swayed, and she stood still with a pitiful look on her face. It was as if it was an illusion that she was about to fall. Her acting skills were really not bad. Luo Qingtong almost laughed out loud. But soon, her attention was attracted by Yi Qianming's movement in front of her. He was too close. Luo Qingtong stared at the face of the man who appeared in front of her. Chapter 25-30. He suddenly approached Luo Qingtong. The tips of their noses were almost touching, and their lips seemed to be inches away from each other. Luo Qingtong could feel his breath lingering around his nose. What was going on? This person wasn't the type to show his emotions. Luo Qingtong frowned. She remembered Yi Qianxian's temperament. He wouldn't be so close to her. What did he see? Luo Qingtong raised her hand to touch her face. Xiao Tuanzi had helped her change her appearance from her previous life. The birthmark on her face couldn't be more real. He shouldn't be able to see anything wrong with it. Luo Qingtong just thought of this. Suddenly, she seemed to think of something. Her eyes suddenly opened, and she quickly stepped back. She remembered. **T. Even with the birthmark on her face, it was still her appearance from her previous life. And those appearances were exactly the same as her current appearance. Damn it. Luo Qingtong remembered that every time she went out, she would deliberately outline the birthmark and dye it almost covered her entire face. She had deliberately enlarged the birthmark in those outlines and blurs. In this way, no one would pay special attention to her appearance under the half-truth. This was also to prepare for her return to the true Spill continent in the future. After all, if someone found out her identity and suspected that she was related to Xia Qi, they wouldn't be able to find out that she was Luo Qingtong. As a result, she slept in the same tent as Yi Qianxian last night. She woke up in a hurry today and forgot to deepen and widen the birthmark on her face. In other words, the small part of her face without the birthmark was completely exposed to Yi Qianxian at such a close distance. He didn't discover something, did he? Yi Qianxian did feel that Luo Qingtong's face was a little strange. With his eyesight, he knew that the birthmark that covered Luo Qingtong's face had been purposely deepened. But he didn't care too much. Because Luo Qingtong's birthmark was real. But now, seeing the small part of Luo Qingtong's face that wasn't covered by the birthmark, his heart suddenly moved. Why did this small part of her face give him a very familiar feeling? Luo Qingtong's huge birthmark was too confusing. Even if Luo Qingtong didn't deliberately deepen and widen it, it almost covered most of Luo Qingtong's face. With such a huge birthmark covering it, even if Yi Qianxian vaguely felt that Luo Qingtong's face was a little familiar, he couldn't match it with Luo Qingtong's face for a while. But at this moment, he saw Luo Qingtong's figure quickly retreat. He subconsciously grabbed her chin and shrouded her with his breath and strength, fixing her on the spot. He raised his hand and touched the birthmark on Luo Qingtong's face. The birthmark felt real and bumpy. It was definitely not fake. But where did this increasingly familiar feeling come from? Yi Qianxian touched the birthmark on Luo Qingtong's face inch by inch. Following the shape of the birthmark, in his heart, he slowly reconstructed the appearance of Luo Qingtong's face without the birthmark. Chapter 25-31. At that time, not only would she be exposed, but Yi Qianming and the others would also be implicated. Luo Qingtong thought of this and suddenly became anxious. Swish. She put her arms around Yi Qianming's neck and looked up at Yi Qianming with a smile. Hey, brother, what do you see in me? To be honest, brother, you always pay so much attention to me. Be careful that I accidentally fall in love with you. Luo Qingtong didn't retreat but moved forward. She took advantage of Yi Qianming's action of grabbing her chin to get closer to him. The two figures were very close to each other, not to mention that Yi Qianming was carefully looking at Luo Qingtong's face at this moment. The two were even closer to each other. Luo Qingtong suddenly leaned forward and almost got close to Yi Qianming's lips in an instant. Subconsciously, Yi Qianming threw her to the side. Swish. Luo Qingtong staggered back a few steps and then stared at Yi Qianming. Hey. It's just a joke. Brother, do you have to be so angry? When she spoke, Yi Qianming looked at her coldly and didn't say anything. Instead, he turned around and walked to Bei Qing, Feng Yu, and the others. Damn, I was scared to death. Seeing that Yi Qianming didn't discover her identity, Luo Qingtong patted her chest and her heart. God knew that her heart almost jumped to her throat just now. Fortunately, she was quick-witted. Otherwise, her identity would have been exposed just now. Luo Qingtong rejoiced in her heart. Yi Qianming, who returned to Bei Qing and Feng Yu's side, had a gloomy look in his eyes. Was it his illusion? At that moment, the appearance of Luo Qingtong seemed to appear in his mind. They were two different people. One was a man and the other was a woman. What's more, there was a birthmark on her face. That birthmark couldn't be faked and her identity as a man couldn't be faked. Why did he keep mistaking her for Luo Qingtong? But at that moment, what flashed through his mind was Luo Qingtong's face, which seemed to overlap with the hideous face of Luo Xiaoqi. There was also the familiar feeling that he couldn't ignore day after day. Was it really possible for a person to have the same habits and feelings as another person? Yi Qianming's eyes darkened. He raised his hand and called Feng Yu over. Prepare something for me when you go back, no matter what method you use. As he spoke, he told Feng Yu what he wanted. As the latter listened, his eyes widened further and further. Moss. Young master. Is what you said true? Feng Yu's mouth was wide open. He had no idea why his master wanted him to find that thing. What's wrong with master? Why would he suddenly make such an outrageous request? Because of Luo Xiaoqi? He subconsciously looked in the direction of Luo Qingtong but was stopped by Yi Qianming. You don't have to look at her. Just go and prepare. Oh. Feng Yu responded subconsciously and then went back to where he was. After he went back, he began to cry in his heart. It was really because of Luo Xiaoqi. Master, you can't. Don't. Even if the evil doctor isn't here, you can't fall in love with a man. I understand the principle of loving the house and its crow. But master, aren't we going a bit too far? I'm afraid that the evil doctor will go crazy when he finds out. Do you still want a wife? Chapter 25-32. Oh my God. Feng Yu bit his handkerchief crazily. He suddenly remembered that when Yi Qianming and Luo Qingtong met and fell in love with each other, the evil doctor had always been a woman dressed as a man. Because of this, they mistakenly thought that their master was gay. Now it seemed that it wasn't a mistake. Was it really broken? It was just that their master didn't notice it before and thought that he also liked the evil doctor who dressed as a woman. Now that he met Luo Shaoqi, the difference became obvious. Feng Yu's mind was in a mess, but his face remained calm and composed, looking very reliable. In fact, his inner thoughts had already flooded the screen. Just when he couldn't bear this blow, there was movement in the valley below. Swish. 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 A slight sound came from the dense forest. A group of people appeared in front of Luo Qingtong and the others. It's the sixth elder's people. Looking at the sixth elder's people, Chu Xiaofeng frowned slightly. They also took a fancy to the place where the 1,000 silkworms were. Several Tianfeng Chu family members gathered together at the moment. They looked at the open space in front of them and said to a mercenary, "Here? You mean the place where Chu Ku, and the others were attacked?" Yes. These mercenaries were separated from Chu Ku, and the others when they were escaping. In a panic, they ran in another direction, and met with a few disciples of the Chu clan from the Sixth Elder's faction. They told them about the danger they were in and the group immediately rushed over. However, they didn't come to save Chu Ku, and the others. They came to get the spiritual herbs here. Brother Ming, there is a group of magical beasts here. There must be a lot of spiritual herbs inside. Otherwise, the spiritual herbs here are very precious. How about this, we can get the spiritual herbs here together. If there is a lot, we can share it equally. If there is a small amount, we can exchange it for resources. Whoever takes it will exchange it with resources of equal value. How about it? A Tianfeng Chu family member said. Okay. The Tianfeng Chu family member called Brother Ming was the strongest among the Tianfeng Chu family members. His strength was close to that of a core disciple. So when he heard this, he immediately nodded with a proud expression. On the other hand, the mercenaries beside him were looking around worriedly. Young masters, I'm afraid this place is not simple. Let's leave as soon as possible. The group of mercenaries had been on many missions and were very sensitive to danger. The sense of danger in their hearts told them that this was not the territory of ordinary magical beasts. If they weren't careful, they might be completely annihilated. Everyone came here to make a fortune and didn't want to lose their lives for nothing. However, just like Chu Ku, the disciples of the Heavenly Wind Shu clan didn't care at all. When they were on their way here, they didn't see any traces of magical beasts. Not to mention that Chu Ku, and the other mercenaries who had fled were not that strong. How could they believe their words? The mercenaries they brought with them were all extremely powerful. Under such circumstances, dealing with a group of magical beasts that weren't very powerful was no problem at all. These mercenaries had groundless fears and were cowardly. A few of the Chu clan's disciples from the Heavenly Wind Chu clan were filled with disdain. Especially Brother Ming, who said coldly, "Don't say any more. Your mission is to protect us. Come with us now." Chapter 25-33. As he spoke, his expression was full of disdain. The reason why these mercenaries were so serious was because they wanted to get more rewards. Since that was the case, he would satisfy them and save them the trouble of chattering and not putting in any effort. Young Master Ming. The mercenary leader who spoke looked at the contemptuous smile on Chu Tianming's face and the expressions of the disciples of the Tianfeng Chu family beside him. He felt very embarrassed. It was obvious that these disciples of the Tianfeng Chu family treated their words as bargaining chips to get more rewards. He was furious. At this moment, a mercenary beside him said, "Forget it, leader. They won't listen to us anyway. We just have to be more careful." The mercenaries saw the expressions of Chu Tianming and the others and naturally knew what they were thinking. Immediately, they were filled with righteous indignation and stopped their leader from continuing. When the other mercenary leaders saw this, they naturally knew that it was meaningless for them to say anything more. They could only let their own mercenaries be more prepared. If there was any danger later, it would be easier for them to deal with it. When Chu Tianming and the others saw that the mercenaries were silent, they thought that they had guessed correctly. These people had deliberately made this place sound so dangerous for the sake of rewards. Lowly people were indeed lowly people. No matter where they went, they would never forget their greedy nature. They snorted with disdain and led the way to the open space. "You guys follow me. Just protect us. We will deal with the rest ourselves." They could use the strength of this magical beast group to train themselves. If they could save Chu Ku and the others, they might be able to get some benefits from the third elder and Madame Xing. With this thought, they immediately sped up towards the open space. When the leaders of the mercenary groups heard their voices, their expressions turned even colder. "You all heard that? Later, you just have to do your best to protect these young masters. The rest is none of our business." Even if they lost an arm or a leg, it was none of their business. A leader of a high-ranking mercenary group snorted coldly. The other mercenary leaders also had the same thoughts. The mercenaries under them naturally obeyed, and all of them agreed. When Chu Tianming and the others moved, Luo Qingtong and the others also saw them and rushed towards the open space. This is really a case of a skilled person being bold. Luo Qingtong's lips curved slightly. Because the Tianfeng Chu clan's disciples were a bit ahead of them, Luo Qingtong and the others were still in the valley, but they were already in the dense forest. Luo Qingtong and the others could see them, but they couldn't see Luo Qingtong and the others. Luo Qingtong shook her head as she watched them rush towards the open space. From what she could see, the seemingly empty space was, in fact, densely covered with countless invisible threads. 1,000 silkworms. Their strength was indeed not very strong. Compared to other powerful magic beasts, they did not have much of an advantage and did not seem to be very powerful. But their threads were a huge killing weapon that was different from other magic beasts. This was especially true when they gathered in groups. Think about it, if the sky was filled with such threads, invisible and traceless, and even without knowing where they would weave into a dense net and envelop you. Then, no matter how many people came, they would all die. After all, a thread was a sharp blade. The threads that filled the sky were more than thousands of sharp blades. Chapter 25-34. Luo Qingtong looked at the disciples of the Tianfeng Chu family who were rushing toward the open space. Chu Xiaofeng saw this and hurried forward. He said to Luo Qingtong, "Little Qi, let's go. They are the disciples of the sixth elder. If we don't hurry, they will take the initiative." Chu Xiaofeng had no use for the 1,000 silkworms. He didn't know why Luo Qingtong wanted them. However, he wanted the spiritual herbs guarded by the 1,000 silkworms. Seeing the disciples of the sixth elder of the Tianfeng Chu family rushing toward the open space, he was very anxious. If possible, he didn't want the spiritual herbs guarded by the 1,000 silkworms to fall into the hands of others. As he spoke, he was about to rush down with the mercenaries behind him. However, Luo Qingtong stopped him. "It's okay. They can't get it." Luo Qingtong's voice was leisurely and her face was indifferent. The temperament of a strategist in the past unconsciously appeared on her body. "Let them explore the 1,000 silkworms first." Luo Qingtong focused her eyes on the open space. She had seen the figures of those people entering the open space. Oh, those 1,000 silkworms were smart. They deliberately left a few openings on the edge of the open space facing the dense forest for the disciples and mercenaries of the Tianfeng Chu family to enter. She didn't know whether this hunting ability was innate or cultivated after killing too many people in the open space. Luo Qingtong smiled faintly and said nothing. When Chu Xiaofeng heard her words, he immediately stopped in his tracks. He trusted Luo Qingtong's words the most. The young man had never made a mistake when making plans for their team. This time should be no exception. Thinking of this, he calmed down. He restrained his temper and stood beside Luo Qingtong. His eyes were closely watching the open space in front of them. His eyes were eager and nervous. He hoped that Luo Shaoqi was right this time. The moment Luo Qingtong's words left her mouth, Chu Yufei, who was originally lowering her head and enduring the embarrassment in her heart, suddenly raised her head and looked at Luo Qingtong with a bit of astonishment and disbelief. They were indeed ambushed in the open. However, she didn't specifically remind him of this when she was telling him about it. Chu Yufei thought that after Luo Qingtong and the others entered the open space and were attacked, she would tell them about it. She would say that she had forgotten about it and then point out a safe way for Luo Qingtong and the others. In this way, although Luo Qingtong and the others suffered some losses in the beginning, and even some casualties, she saved everyone. At that time, everyone in Chu Xiaofeng's team would be indebted to her. Naturally, they would treat her differently. Chu Yufei's plan was very good. She even deliberately concealed the 1,000 silkworms when she talked about them. No one found out that she deliberately omitted this part. She didn't expect that Luo Qingtong didn't get her reminder at all, but seemed to have completely seen through the mystery of the open space. How did she know that the people of the sixth elder's side couldn't pass through? Chu Yufei looked at Luo Qingtong's back and her heart was in a mess. She didn't know how she saw through it. The group of mercenaries had long known about Luo Qingtong's amazing observation skills and had long been used to it. Hearing Luo Qingtong's words, they immediately stopped faster than Chu Xiaofeng. Unknowingly, Luo Qingtong's prestige in this team had long been higher than that of Chu Xiaofeng and the Red Flame Mercenary Corps. She had become the backbone of the team. Even the lightly injured mercenaries that Chu Yufei and Chu Ku had brought with them followed her lead. Chapter 25-35. Ah! A tragic cry instantly came from the open space. The disciples of Tianfeng Chu Elder Lu and the guards behind them, who had just entered the open space unimpeded, seemed to have bumped into invisible blades. In an instant, many of the mercenaries on the periphery were cut by the invisible blades in the air. Some of them had their legs cut off, while others had their arms cut off. Some of them were directly cut into several pieces. They did not even have time to call for help and died on the spot. Who? What's going on? Where did these attacks come from? The disciples of the Heavenly Wind Shu clan's sixth elder were still mocking the mercenaries in their hearts for being so cautious. They said there was danger, but where was the danger? They had effortlessly walked into the open space and did not even see the figure of a magical beast. Those magical beasts might have eaten and drunk their fill and were resting. It just so happened that they had rushed to the spiritual herbs they were guarding and killed them directly. Then, they could collect those spiritual herbs for their own use. At the same time, they were mocking Chu Ku and her guards in their hearts for being so weak. They had heard that Chu Yufei had 2 high-level and 3 mid-level mercenary corps by her side. They were not weak, but they were so easily defeated by those magical beasts. How useless! Everyone felt disdain in their hearts. They were even more dismissive of the mercenaries' warning that they had been ambushed in this open space. There was no cover around this open space. Where could those magical beasts ambush them? Obviously, this was just an excuse those mercenaries found to cover up their incompetence. But even so, they still raised their guard when they entered this open space. Chu Tianming released his sword aura as he walked and stabbed it deep into the open space to see if those magical beasts were hiding there. After discovering that there were none, he sneered at the mercenaries' words even more. But just as they were feeling smug and disdainful, the attack came silently. Moreover, the murderous aura was aggressive and did not give them any time to breathe. Everyone did not even know where the problem was. There was clearly nothing around them. There wasn't any fluctuation of spiritual qi either. Where did these blade-like attacks come from? Chu Tianming and the others panicked. Just as they were screaming miserably in the clearing, a series of rustling sounds rang out from the dense forest. In an instant, Chu Tianming and the others looked up and were scared out of their wits. It turned out that the creatures crawling out of the dense forest were wriggling magical beasts. These demonic beasts were shrouded in dense black corrosive spirit qi, and their bodies seemed to be covered with vajra spikes. Its huge mouth was filled with teeth, and there was also a pair of large pincers that were opening and closing. Their bodies were covered with white dots, which looked like stripes on their skin at first glance. However, if one were to take a closer look, one would discover that countless threads were shooting out from it. Thousand silkworms. Even though the demonic beasts weren't the strongest, they were still extremely difficult to deal with. Once they gathered into a group, even a group of magical beasts that were far more powerful than them would have to avoid them. You're tuning into the Biyao's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.